What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was neglected by his teachers but created his own forbidden jutsu? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. It was a normal day in the Leaf Village. The sun warmed the streets and everyone seemed to be minding their own business. But there was a single individual to whom normal was far from perfect. That person was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, the village's Jinchuriki. Most people treated him with scorn and indifference, so a couple years ago he had decided to ignore them. Living in solitude was better than living in fear and pain. Obviously not everything was as bad as it sounded. He had a small apartment, but it was all for himself. The kind old man who ruled the village visited him from time to time, giving some money and food to fulfill his needs. The owners of a ramen stand were pretty nice to him, and as many people were just waiting for a chance to shout at him. He had to learn to be sneaky and stealthy if he wanted to get something. He didn't steal things per se, but he used to take things the people discarded when they weren't looking. You could ask why a 6-year-old child would take things he found on the streets. Well, that was after he learned the value of building things he wanted. Everything started when he was at the orphanage. He saw that all the other kids had multiple toys, but he always seemed to arrive too late because the woman giving them away always told him she had no toy left for him. Years later, when he was living on his own, he saw other kids playing with plush toys, with carriages and dolls, yet he had none. He tried saving some of the money the old man gave him, but the store owners usually told him he didn't have enough for the toys he wanted, or the other times they just forbid him from entering their stores. One day he saw some discarded pieces of wood in a corner. He saw some other people putting garbage next to it, so he assumed it was a place where people placed discarded things they didn't need anymore, and tried to take the wood. But a man walking close shouted him, accusing him of stealing things that weren't his. Naruto just panicked and ran away, but later that night he returned, and this time there was absolutely no one around, so he just took all the wood he saw, along with a couple of dented knives and some carton boxes he used to store his loot. He worked during all night until he could make something square with the wood and some rounded pieces of carton. Then he used the glue and assembled something that resembled a very rough chariot, but it was the product of his own effort, which made him feel very accomplished before taking some very deserved sleep. The other kids and some of the parents were surprised when they saw little Naruto playing with something that obviously handmade but made him very happy. He played with the same chariot for a complete week at the park without paying any mind to the other children. Instead of looking at them every 10 minutes as he usually did, trying to find a way to approach them without the interference of their parents. Another day when he wasn't seen by the families that frequented that playing ground, the kids wondered where he was until he arrived 2 days later with a new chariot. It was more detailed, and he must have picked some paint because both were painted. One was red and yellow with the colors of the Fire Nation, while the other was in different shades of blue. He stood there playing with his toys for almost 2 weeks until the first incident happened. The other kids usually were aware of Naruto's presence, but their parents often told them to not mix with him or interact with the boy. Not matter how many times the more friendly asked their parents why he was all alone. But unfortunately there were some kids a lot less friendly, and one of them decided Naruto was probably a jerk because instead of paying attention to them he spent all his time playing with ugly and cheap things, so he decided to intervene. He started running in random directions until he finally ran towards Naruto. The blonde boy was not aware of his surroundings until he felt movement on his field of vision, and then a moving figure came close to him, stepping on one of his chariots and throwing the other to the side before crashing with him. "Don't get in the way, you brat," shouted the bully when trying to regain his foot. All the people around stopped what they were doing to look in Naruto's direction. All the adults in the surroundings were aware of what happened because the bully's intentions were very clear. In that moment, the blonde boy, who was more than a year younger than the other boy, moved, tackling the bully to the ground, holding his neck with his right hand. He was feeling a lot of anger because he had spent a lot of time and effort to build his toys. For a moment he thought in hurting him, but then he returned to his rational state and just threw some sand at his eyes before gather his toys, or what remained of them, and went walking slowly to his home. Some weeks ago Naruto had learnt the value of your own work, but today he gained other 2 important lessons. There were some people who were mean no matter if you did nothing to them. His anger was dangerous, so he needed to avoid that feeling if he didn't want to hurt anyone. From that day on, Naruto never returned to the park. In the next few days he would gather more materials to create a ladder to reach the roof of his building and spend all the afternoons playing there. As it was expected, the Hokage found about this development and grew worried when 3 days later Naruto hadn't returned to the playground, so he went to visit the resident Jinchuriki. He knocked the door for a while until Naruto heard the noise and shouted from the roof. The Hokage just jumped and gave him some company. He asked about the incident where the other boy destroyed his toy, but Naruto just answered he didn't want to deal with that mean boy, so he preferred to stay home away from mean people. The Hokage knew isolation was not a natural response for a 6-year-old child, but Naruto was anything but normal, and from what he heard the blonde was aware of his initial reaction and desisted from his initial intention to choose a harmless one. The Uzumaki did not spoke about the incident or his feelings about it. Instead he spent a long time explaining about the things he had done with his own hands and the process undergone each of them. Sarutobi realized Naruto had found something he was good at, something he could put in effort and be rewarded for that, so he decided he would give the boy the tools to excel at this hobby he had found. At the end of that day the Hokage left Naruto's department with mixed feelings. On one hand he was worried for his isolation, but on the other hand he was glad the boy had found something that made him happy, so he decided to support him. During the next morning Naruto heard someone knock on his door again, which was very unusual, so he went to open this time and found a masked ninja with 2 large boxes. The Hokage sent these things for you, and said he hoped for you to be happy with the path you decided to take, informed the Anbu ninja before giving him the 2 packages. Naruto was happy and curious with this gesture, so he opened the first box and saw many pieces of wood in different shapes, some saws, nails and different building tools. This was a great gift because it would improve the quality of all the things the blonde made from this day on. Then he went to the other box and saw the inside, to find many books. At first he thought books were boring, but when he saw their covers, how to build toys, how to build furniture, how to create your own garden. All the books were about creation of useful things, so the boy decided he would give them a chance because it could allow him to have some nicer things. Time passed flowing around everyone, and now we find an 8-year-old Naruto entering the ninja academy. It would be 4 years of studying, learning and getting the skills to survive in the harsh world they lived in. The blonde was used to be on his own, so he arrived into the class, got into the first row to be able of paying attention and not be disturbed by other people. Within half an hour the classroom was filled with many kids he remembered vaguely from his days at the playground. Fortunately there was no trace of the bully that antagonized him. The other kids, being some of the clan heirs, also remembered the blonde boy that always played by himself at the park. They had long forgotten the warning their parents gave them about him, so instead of rejection now there was only curiosity towards the kid. Naruto carried his things in a handmade backpack composed of wood and leather. He also had a wood box to store his lunch and his pencils. He listened carefully to what the teacher was saying, and the moment he didn't understood something he raised his hand to ask, but the teacher just looked at him with disdain and ignored him. The Uzumaki just looked at his eyes and lowered his hand. He already knew some people was just mean and there was no use in wasting your time with them. He would try to find the answers he needed from books or from the old man Hokage, who had said many times before entering the academy his door was open in case he needed help. Days passed without anything out of the ordinary. The blonde went to the academy every day, listened to man talk the whole morning, ate his lunch in a roof alone, and then practiced whatever they had prepared for the afternoon. That was until the teacher explained the many uses of chakra, and one of them was to make more resistant tools and sharper weapon edges. The next day Naruto was absent from the academy. The teacher was surprised when the blonde did not report because it was his first day of absence, but he thanked to the gods for not having to endure his presence at the front of his class that day. The weird thing came the next day when he missed the class again, and the same happened the next day. At the end of the first month the Chunin teacher presented the first-year students' grades to the Hokage, who liked to see how the new youngsters were doing in case someone seemed to be unfit to become a ninja or needed some special help. "Why Naruto's space is blank?" questioned the village leader, fearing some foul play against his protege. "I had forgotten to inform you, Lord Hokage, but the brat had skipped school for the last 8 days. Replied the Chunin, looking at the ground. Sarutobi looked at him, but the man was hiding his face in shame. There were specific rules that said if a student missed 3 days or more without any notification he had to inform the Hokage or his assistant to find what was happening with the student, especially during the first year when they were exploring their areas of interest. "I'll only let his one pass, but if you fail to be fair with Naruto once more, you'll be doing D-rank missions until he becomes a genin," warned the Hokage. Before motioning one of his bodyguards, "Have a tracking team at the ready in case it's necessary," said before departing from his office. He needed to check on Naruto to at least see he was doing okay. The old man moved at high speeds to reach Naruto's building. He jumped to the last floor and gave an extra high jump to see if he was on the roof, but he wasn't there, so he opted to knock the door, and after waiting a couple of minutes he heard some movement on the inside. Then after the sound of steps, a very sleepy Naruto opened the door. "Hi old man. What are you doing here?" asked the blonde. Hiruzen asked if he could pass because he wanted to talk with the boy, and he invited him inside. "Naruto, your teacher says you had missed many days at the academy. Can you tell me the reason for that?" questioned the Hokage this time. Naruto looked at the ground for a moment and then took a long sigh. "You got me. I skipped classes because the teacher told us about chakra on one of his lectures and I had to try it. You know, if it could make tools more resistant and edges sharper, it could help me build more complex things, so that night I tried the exercise." And he took a book on his table explaining the basics of chakra in terms of physical and spiritual energies and how to unlock that for the first time. At this point Sarutobi was very interested because it seemed Naruto had been able to awaken his chakra just with the book's instructions, which meant he was very skilled or had tons of chakra. But considering who his parents were, it could be both. "When I unlocked my chakra, I experienced an amazing feeling. My body felt stronger, so I used some saws and the wood felt like butter. I could even cut pieces of metal, so I was doing some adjustments to my clothes," explained the blonde before going to his room and come back with a new outfit. The Hokage had seen him wear those orange clothes but supposed he just wanted to draw attention. Then the Uzumaki explained those were the only one he could buy, so he made some dye from plants following the gardening book instructions and dyed them into a black outfit with baggy pants and a short-sleeved t-shirt. Then he showed the old man some metal guard he was finishing with the leaf symbol for his shoulders and gloves. "I had to practice really hard to get the leaf symbol right on those, but the result was worth it," said an accomplished Naruto. The Hokage had expected many things but not this, so he was kind of disarmed there. He decided to just give the boy a hug. "I'm quite proud of you, my boy. Your skills had improved a lot," stated the village leader watching his progress. Having said that, "Please try to don't miss your classes or you could miss an important piece of knowledge for your future or even your building skills. You can tell your teacher I allowed you to have a free afternoon per week, but that's all I can give you without stunting your growth," concluded the Hokage, getting a smile and a nod from the blonde. "Deal," replied Naruto, happy with all that development. The next day Naruto would return to the academy. When the teacher was checking who was present and who didn't, he looked around to see a girl behind his seat. "Psst, hey. Could you tell me what topics I missed?" asked the blonde, trying to put a smile on his face. To his bad luck, poor shy Hinata couldn't answer him. She just got red and started babbling some nonsense, and this time Naruto was who misjudged someone. "Oh, never mind. Excuse me for disturbing you," apologized Naruto with a new scowl. He saw people talk to each other all the time, but most of times he tried it, the people wasn't helpful at all. In the end, he thought asking his teacher was no use, and the same applied to ask one of his classmates, so he just paid extra attention to what the teacher said. "Well, today I'll not give you any lectures, instead you'll try to unlock your chakra again. Those who can do this already should do it again to exercise your ability to draw your chakra, while the rest has to reach your inner core and bring your power to the surface," explained the scarred ninja. "Naruto, you have missed the previous days, but we're trying to unlock everyone's chakra." Iruka was going to explain the process when the blonde interrupted him. "I can already do that," said Naruto, taking a breath and channeling all the chakra he could grab from his inside. The result surprised Iruka and some of the chakra-sensitive kids like Shino, Hinata or Akamaru. Naruto's chakra was more potent than Iruka's, and those four individuals picked this fact. "Okay. Well done. You should try and practice how quick your chakra answer your call," said a very confused and surprised Iruka. At first he expected the blonde to fail miserably for being absent for so long, but it seemed he had a ton of chakra. For a moment he considered the idea of accusing him of using the Kyuubi's chakra, but his presence felt very natural, just like his but more potent. There was nothing of the raw malice and killing intent of the Kyuubi. He had felt those on the dreadful night of its release, so those were feelings he remembered clearly. Naruto had been using his chakra and channeling it through his tools, so without even being aware of it, he was training his chakra control from the very beginning. During the afternoon they went to the backyard and he saw some discarded shuriken in the distance, so he made a mental note to not forget about them. During that night the blonde modified his usual route in using a malfunctioning lighter he picked from the streets months ago and fixed. He scanned through all the training courses the academy had, taking all the tools he found into his pack. In the end he found 9 shuriken and 3 kunai plus a medium amount of ninja wire. He stayed awake very late in the night sharpening the weapons and trying to learn how to use the wire. He overslept but decided he would still go to the academy and arrived after the first break. Iruka looked at him but said nothing and resumed his speech. With a few days Naruto realized there were little things a chakra-reinforced kunai couldn't cut or slice, so he was able to make a qualitative jump in his manufacturer skills, and for the first time he was able to create a working gear. He had disassembled some watches in the past out of curiosity, so he knew how they worked. The first thing he made was a real-sized chariot with pedals so he could fit inside and move around the village. His first problem was the direction. His first run was incredible fun until he crashed with a wall. Fortunately he wasn't too fast and the chariot didn't suffer almost any damage. The next thing he did was to add a direction system to turn around and rectify his path. This time his fun met no limits. For a whole month Naruto would spend 1 or 2 hours moving around the village in his chariot. At first the people thought it was from a rich person, but within the days they figured out who was inside and decided to ignore it. The blonde was very careful to not hit any person on the streets and only raised his speed in open and empty places. The third Hokage saw Naruto playing around the village in the chariot, but as he didn't do any damage he denied any action taken against him. The blonde was participating in the academy and how he used his free time was up to him. Some bold people even demanded for the chariot to be taken from him as he should have probably steal it, but the Hokage warned that people would imprison them for breaking the law the next time they came up to him with something as unreasonable as that. Naruto was pretty happy. He was as lonely as the first day, but now he spent most of his time working on something, so he didn't have much time to reflect on his loneliness. After the chariot he did a cannon he filled with anything he found. First he used some scrap metal he picked up from the market district and they were fired through compressed air. But after that he worked on the cylinder to make exclusively for firing kunai. He put a kunai inside, pulled a small chain, and the weapon was thrown at very high speed. Higher than he could muster at his early 8 years of life, so that was the first weapon that created with his own 2 hands. So far he felt pretty accomplished. The other kids in the academy didn't make much of an effort in getting to know Naruto. For most of them he was just the lonely blonde boy who always brought things to the school. Sometimes were new clothes, with different colors or metal ornaments. Other times were action figures or even mysterious boxes. No one knew where he got all that from because it was a very known fact that he was an orphan, but not even one kid suspected he could be able to make all that by himself. The Ninja Academy, the blonde realized, was very simple because all what you needed to do was learning some specific historical events, and then came the practical portion where you needed chakra to perform the exercises and a mild physical condition to pass. The blonde was about average in all of that, but the truth was the fact he could do really well in test if he really tried studying, but he usually spent most of his time building things. After the real-sized chariot Naruto realized he had built his first machine, and with the kunai launcher he could say he had successfully built a weapon, despite how simple it was. Even for an 8-year-old kid, it was obvious chakra had an incredible variety of uses, so he spent many weeks trying to read and find information about atypical uses of chakra. The first thing he found was ninjutsu, but he had already seen that. Then came physical enhancing, and he also knew that in its variant the ability to enhance objects. But searching deeper he found kenjutsu, the use of chakra in the weapons wielding styles. Genjutsu, or the use of chakra-based illusions, but then he found about sealing, puppeteering, tracking, summoning, healing, among other wonderful things, so he was shocked with how versatile it was. The blonde tried finding on his own means information about all those uses, but the things he could get his hands on had very limited information, so he decided he would go to the Hokage, who was called the Professor, so he should probably know something about those fields of specialization. Hiruzen was very surprised to see Naruto in a time he should be at the academy, but he was following his grades and he was very comfortably in the middle of his class. The old man suspected that position was only due to the lack of focus, but he supposed developing other abilities was part of his growth too. What a pleasant surprise, Naruto, although you should not be skipping classes, greeted Sarutobi, getting a caught look from the blonde who had the decency to look ashamed. What brings you here, my boy? Questioned this time the Hokage. Well, after doing many things with the tools you gave me after using some chakra, I was wondering about all the things you could do with this power and wanted to find more about different abilities that used chakra. Explained Naruto, making the Hokage gladly surprised, because the Uzumaki wanted to improve himself, but the pace the academy kept was too slow and general for his wandering mind. For a moment, he thought about giving him more books or something, but in the end, He decided as this was the first time the blonde came to him for guidance he would give him some time. "I think it'll be better if I show you about some of the things I've learned over the years," said the Hokage, signaling some of his Anbu to prepare his personal training ground. He motioned Naruto to walk alongside him while talking about the time when he was able to cast almost all the ninja techniques people from the village knew with the exception of those clan-specific and the blood limits. Then came the natural question about blood limits, and the old man proceeded to explain about those who were born with some special traits as the members of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans. The Uzumaki complained a little, but then Sarutobi told Naruto neither the fourth Hokage or him had any blood limit and they were still capable of becoming the top ninjas of their generation, and that did the trick. The boy was deep in thinking about how awesome a ninja had to be in order to be elected Hokage and how the old man and the fourth had developed their skills on their own. "Pay attention, Naruto. I'll start showing you the 3 basic ninja styles," said the Hokage, walking some meters away from the blonde. "This is ninjutsu, the most used style, fire release. Great fireball," shouted before exhaling an incredible large and hot ball of fire. It was capable of completely destroy a training dummy very similar to the located at the academy. There was no need to say the blonde was incredible impressed. Then comes taijutsu, or the art of physical hand-to-hand combat. There are some special techniques, but in essence it consists in enhancing your body with chakra," explained Hiruzen before using his left foot to stomp the ground. He did a loud sound and nothing happened, but then he exchanged a look with the boy and channeled chakra on his right foot. Then he stomped the ground with it and destroyed a portion of the ground he hit, creating a small tremor. "That is the difference chakra can make," added to prove his point. At this point Naruto was speechless. He knew about ninjutsu and taijutsu, but watching the real deal was another thing. Next comes genjutsu, or the art of illusion. This can deceive people and allow for advantages in combat, but some very skilled people is able to hurt their opponents with them, informed the Hokage before doing hand seals, and trapping Naruto in an illusion Lightbringer was called and made Naruto see nothing but light from all directions. He was very disoriented, and after calling the Hokage for a few times he dispelled the technique. Doing things this way allowed Naruto to see what could a good ninja do with any of the styles the Hokage would show him. After the main 3 come other useful but not so popular fields of specialization. One of my students is the most renowned medical ninja in the world for her ability to heal people with chakra, introduced the old man before taking a shuriken and making a cut on his hand. But then he channeled green chakra on the other and closed the wound, leaving a very thin scar. "But as you see, my skills in that particular field are not so great," added, referring to the scar. Naruto apologized for making him wound himself, but the Hokage said it was nothing and kept on with his demonstration. "Next is also one of the field another of my students excels at, it's sealing, and despite being very difficult is also a very rewarding field," explained the Hokage before taking a scroll, drawing something on it with a brush, and then placed the same shuriken he used to cut his hand on the center of the drawing. "Seal," said the old man, doing a single hand seal, and the shuriken disappeared. Naruto was confused, but the Hokage gave him the scroll and told him to channel some chakra into the drawing. The blonde did so and was speechless when the shuriken was visible again. Along with ninjutsu, sealing is one of the most versatile uses of chakra because with enough skills and experience the user can do almost anything from storing items, creating barriers or complex mechanisms, added the village leader, providing further information on the topic. "Now comes another field one of my students is famous for," said with a sad face this time, "summoning technique," and bit his thumb before a large sealing array was visible on the ground and a human-sized monkey appeared next to him. "Excuse me for summoning you, Tenka, but I was showing young Naruto about summoning," excused himself the Hokage, who was very respectful with his companions. "There is no need to excuse Hiruzen, teaching the new generation is a duty all of us should fulfill," replied the monkey, surprising Naruto with its ability to speak and think like that. "Young ninja, summoning is a ritual you do after finding a clan of animals willing to lend their strength to you. It's based on respect, trust and mutual cooperation. Please never forget those principles," intervened the summon before saying goodbye to Sarutobi and Naruto and returning to his home. Little Naruto believed it would be amazing to have an entire clan of partners and friends. Being so lonely, he valued company and support very highly. Then Sarutobi grabbed a bow staff placed on the training ground. Despite being mainly used for the swords techniques, Kenjutsu is using chakra in combination with a weapon, and then he did a forward thrust with the bow and it extended almost 10 meters, I prefer a blunt weapon as the bow staff because of the ability to create a range where no enemy can enter without being pummeled. Explained this time the Hokage. I can't really show you a tracking technique as those are not that visible, but they allow you to find some people or objects either by scent, sight or chakra signature among other means. Naruto was relieving all the things the village's leader had shown him that day when the old man asked about anything else, so he tried to remember. I also read about puppetry and kinjutsus, replied the boy. Well, puppetry is an art from the Sand Village where they create strings with their chakra to control puppets and other weapons around the battlefield. I cannot perform that, but I've known very powerful ninjas from that village. One of the advantages I think it was is the ability to control or manipulate things without having them in your hands, explained the Hokage, moving his hands as if he was resembling a puppeteer making a kunai move in the air following the trajectory he wanted. Then he took a firm position with a serious face. As for kinjutsus, they are special techniques forbidden for most ninjas because either they are too risky for the user or break some kind of law, being too atrocious. Said this time with a menacing tone. I'll only show you one. It's called shadow clone technique. It creates physical copies of its caster but requires an incredible amount of chakra. So much that a person without high chakra reserves could die creating just a single one. Proceeded to tell the details before doing the hand seal. Shadow cloning technique, shouted Hiruzen before creating 2 copies of himself. One of the copies patted Naruto's head while the other picked a leaf from the ground to prove their tangibility. The blonde thought this jutsu was very useful to do many things at the same time, but decided he would try to be older before asking the Hokage to taught him it. It had been 2 months since the beginning of the second year at the academy. Naruto had passed the first year between the middle and the high-scored students. When he paid attention he had a good performance, but that usually happened at the last possible time, ignoring and even missing some of the less relevant classes, in his opinion. His ability to create tools, machines and weapons had also increased. His original chariot had been destroyed one afternoon when he was playing Ninja Wars and tried to use it as a siege weapon tackling a tree. Later he found Konoha's trees were more resistant than most normal trees. Some people believed it was due to the residual chakra of the first Hokage, while others just thought it was because of the chakra-saturated environment they grew in, but in the end his first handmade machine was broken, so he spent some time searching information about different metals and their properties. He found there were different metals and their properties depended on the minerals they were composed, so the next step was researching and forging. A critical part of forging was providing the fire, so he had been training to master the fire elemental chakra. He found some theory and then the first 2 exercises. The first one was to transform his normal chakra into fire, and the task was to ignite a leaf in fire. It took him 3 months, but finally he was able to burn the stupid leaf. Then came control, so he had to set a log on fire and then control that fire with his chakra for an hour without burning the log completely. That had been difficult for the blonde, but after 4 months of work he was able to do it. Soon he discovered the time was not a factor but the control. He had to supply chakra to keep the fire alive, but not too much or the whole thing would burn. From what the Hokage had said, most kids his age would even struggle to gather chakra in his body, so it was very rare for a 9-year-old kid to be mastering the fire element, but he informed him some talented members of the Uchiha clan achieved a similar result around that age, and that made him feel very pleased with himself. After finishing those exercises, the Hokage awarded Naruto with his first ninja technique, the Great Fireball. The signature technique of the Uchiha clan, but also a classic in fire-type ninjas' repertoire. It's kind of ironic for a person close to the Senju clan's lineage to have the Uchiha's signature jutsu as his first one, but Hashirama-sensei always said there were more similarities between their clans than most people believed, thought the old man with a smile after watching Naruto succeeding in the Great Fireball technique on his first try. Congratulations Naruto, you are ready to make your own forge. When the Hokage found most people refused to sell Naruto, he got livid, but the blonde told him he didn't mind anymore. For a while he was upset, but now he understood that's just how some people are, so they reached an agreement. Naruto would provide some discarded weapons, scrap metal and useful things he found on his raids, and the old man would sell them and give the money to Naruto. The blonde had been doing this for almost a year, plus he also had the old Hokage to sell his apartment, which the landlord bought to have his complex demon-free, and all of this was to buy a house. It was far from the main village's buildings, but it was 2 times larger and had a good backyard for the blonde to use as both a workshop and a storage deposit. He hadn't discussed it with the Hokage, but after getting the fire elemental mastery he wanted to train in sealing and puppeteering. When asked at the academy what were his goals in life, he was left speechless. Some years ago he would have sought the validation and approbation of other people. But now he only wanted to have a good time and build interesting things, so he said he didn't a goal yet. He thought about that for many weeks until he realized the path of the ninja was just another tool at his disposal. He didn't feel strongly identified with Konoha's colors or with achieving great strength. That was also another means to an end. What he liked was to design cool things and make them reality, so after a period of introspection he decided, I'll be a famous inventor and people from all the world would know about my creations, declared the Uzumaki in front of his mirror. From the things Sarutobi showed him a year ago, sealing was very useful because it could allow him to keep things hidden on his machines, like weapons or ammo, and puppeteering could allow him to control many tools at the same time or even activate some mechanism from a distance. Plus, if a man so awesome as the Hokage told him he didn't know about puppeteering, he would be very recognized if he was able to master an art even the village's leader didn't. At the end of the first year, Naruto discovered his chakra capacity was high, probably higher than his teachers combined, and with every time he trained in control and exhausted his power, it grew even further. Some books said your total amount grow with you until your late 20s, but the main core would be reached around 15, so if he trained hard, he could be really a powerhouse. He now had a very greedy project, but if it worked the results would be amazing. With that in mind, Naruto created his own forge. He read a lot in books, and thanks to his mastery over fire nature chakra, he was able to extinguish any fire that went out of control. He knew buying the equipment would probably be easier and cheaper if the Hokage helped him, but doing things with his own two hands made him feel successful at something. So after 3 weeks he had his first operational forge working. Now he would need some minerals to create metals, and the mountain terrain at the back of the Hokage mountain was the perfect place, but it was a journey that required at least a day, and that meant missing a day at the academy. The Hokage wasn't much happy with that, but he acknowledged Naruto didn't need the academy very much. He already had some of the skills they developed there, and the rest weren't really that necessary for the paths chosen by the blonde, so he allowed only if he was only missing a day each week. Some of the other kids were starting to wonder why Naruto would be absent a day every week. Some even tried to ask their parents to be excused from the academy that day, but none of them had any luck. Out of the group, most of them dismissed the blonde as a fool who hardly paid any attention, but there were some children like Sasuke Uchiha, Shikamaru Nara, and Shino Aburame who could tell there was something else with the blonde. He didn't pay attention in class because he didn't understand. He did it because it didn't interest him, but the things he was always working on or reading proved he had a very gifted mind for his young 9 years. A couple of months later, Sarutobi found himself doing some paperwork when he saw 2 figures kneel in front of him. They seemed to bring news, but they must not be urgent or they would have already spoken. "Rise," ordered the Hokage, watching with interest. "Sir, we think you should watch the village. There is some commotion because of Uzumaki-san's most recent creation," informed the masked ninja, devoid of any ill intentions towards Naruto but unsure on how to address what was happening outside. The Hokage would not admit it, but he was curious about what could this be about and happy to have an excuse to leave his paperwork. "Thanks for your report," replied the Hokage before donning his hat and going to the balcony on his office. The commotion was caused because Naruto was flying in the middle of the village. How could a 9-year-old child fly, you ask? Well, he was on a square box lifted by a metallic sphere. He saw some fire at the base of the sphere, so he supposed Naruto was making it float with his fire chakra. It was the first time in his life he saw something like that, and he had to concede it to the blonde. In that moment the Hokage was completely convinced the Uzumaki was not meant to the academy. He needed space and resources to create things that could change everybody's lives. He saw that flying thing and saw a vehicle capable of carrying people between long distances or watch some very wide areas from a safe distance. Naruto had a smirk larger than his face. He was finally showing to the whole village his flying ship. It was actually the 3rd version because the first one had a cloth-made balloon to make the whole thing lighter, but the fire quickly ignited it. Then came the 2nd one, which was very similar but lacked the igniter he placed in the final version. So he needed to hold a constant stream of fire from his own ninjutsu to keep it in the air, while this actual version used a controlled lighter that fed on his chakra, so as long as he touched the device, and channeled chakra on his hand, he could keep his ship on the air and regulate the altitude. The Uzumaki was incredibly proud of the reactions his invention was getting because all the civilians on his path were looking at him with awe while the ninjas did with wonder and curiosity. From what the blonde knew, there was no other machine like this, so it was the first showing of his skill as an inventor. He saw the old man standing on the Hokage tower. The look on his face was very warm. The man he considered his grandfather was happy for him, so that filled his heart. He tried going in his direction, but he had no way of controlling the direction it took, just the altitude, so he just stood there watching him and doing some motions with his hands, attempting to explain this to the Hokage, who just smiled. I want 2 teams scouting around to ensure no one tries anything against Naruto, and another one to fetch him from the academy tomorrow at first hour, stated the Hokage to his personal guard, who just nodded and disappeared to make his orders effective immediately. After 5 hours of flying around the village, Naruto was close to his home, so he used a hook to anchor himself to the ground. His first real show was a complete success, and he wanted to make this the first of many displays of his talent. That night he slept peacefully with a smile on his face, woke up, took a shower, had some milk for breakfast, and arrived at the academy with the same smile plastered on his face. At the academy, everyone was muttering and chatting about Naruto's doing, but no one dared to ask the blonde directly. Iruka arrived into the classroom accompanied by 2 Anbu operatives. Naruto, these 2 gentlemen need to escort you to the Hokage tower, informed the Chunin teacher, getting a nod from the blonde, who accepted and grabbed his belongings before leaving the room. Naruto was still smiling from last day's events. He suspected the Hokage wanted to know about the flying device he had made, but as he usually was very supportive of his creations, he was optimistic about this encounter with the Hokage. "Hello Naruto, it's good to see you," said the old man, welcoming the blonde academy student. The masked ninja did a small bow to their leader before leaving the 2 of them alone in the room. "Yeah, nice to see you too, old man," replied the Uzumaki with a grin. "I think you already suspect what is this about. It was impossible to not appreciate your display, and I must admit you surprised me. I believed your creativity and desire for make things with your own hands was just a hobby or something to fill your free time. But yesterday you showed me you have an incredible mind and the work ethic necessary to make it flourish, and for that I congratulate you," added the Hokage, making the Jinchuriki very happy. "Thank you, you've been a great help during all this process," was Naruto's answer that got a nod from the Hokage. "As the Hokage, it's my duty to detect talent and make it grow for the well-being of the village, so after your performance I thought about making a deal with you," started the Hokage before giving a scroll to Naruto. "It'll be a secret until you sign it, and obviously it's up to you if you want to take it, but I believe it's a very good option," added the Sarutobi while Naruto was reading the document. The scroll had some titles that weren't relevant until the next portion. Uzumaki Naruto has 6 months to fulfill the next requirements. Perform the 3 academy techniques: replacement, transformation and cloning. Perform an elemental technique C rank or above. Show adequate skill in a physical spar against a genin. If he's capable of achieving those requisites, he'll have the promotion to genin, and he'll be authorized to spend his time studying and developing new creations until the rest of his peers achieve the same ninja rank, and then he'll be placed in a 3-man unit and make a career as most ninjas did. In short, you're giving me 6 months to have an early graduation test that will allow me to work full-time on my work as an inventor?" asked the blonde, trying to be sure he understood everything. "Yes, although your test will be harder than the regular, you already have most of the capabilities required. The only point you lack is the physical portion. I know you like to create things, but in this world physical power is required. There are some ninjas so specialized that they don't have to move during combat, but you're too young to have that level of skills, so you need to have at least an adequate combat level," explained the Hokage to Naruto, who understood what the old man was saying. "Okay, I accept your deal," was Naruto's answer before signing the scroll. "It's not a secret, but I'll advise you to be quiet about it, or some people could complain about favoritism. The test will be administered by a ninja I'll choose in the right time to ensure a fair assessment of your skills," reassured the Hokage to Naruto, who nodded. "Do you have some books with information about the academy techniques?" asked the blonde, who had missed the days where they covered that topic. The Hokage searched among his books and grabbed one for Naruto. It was called, "The Basis of Ninjutsu for Beginners." Naruto knew some advanced things about chakra control and fire manipulation, but he didn't know the actual techniques required at the academy, and that book covered far more than just those 3. "And there is a final thing to this deal," commented the Hokage, showing a new scroll. "I'll keep this for the meanwhile, but I saw your flying device and was marveled with all the possibilities, so if during these years you can make a larger prototype for reconnaissance and communications purposes, I'll give you a patent so every time the village makes one of them you'll receive a small payment for your contribution, offered the old man. I can make money from my inventions? Asked a surprised Naruto. If you create something useful or helpful to the village as a whole, the administration can buy that from you in a single payment agreed between both parts or with small rewards every time your creation is made, but you have to help in all the steps needed for its production, explained the Hokage, making Naruto realize how much this meant for his future. You can count on me, old man. I'll have an operational ship by the end of the year, promised Naruto with a nice guy pose. After that, Naruto went directly home. He had a hard test to prepare for, but with the book on the basics of ninjutsu and the scrolls their teachers gave them, he had all the resources he needed and only had to put some time on that. On that very same day, he started studying in order to learn the 3 techniques required at the academy. He realized after doing so many exercises to improve his chakra control and master his elemental release, the techniques sounded simple. The replacement and transformation techniques were easy and he was able to learn them on his first day. The clone technique was a little harder, and while he wasn't able to create less than 3 without screwing the jutsu, he believed it was a useless move. At the end of the week he had the techniques under his belt and was able to use them quickly, but the book talked about other kinds of clones and some more advanced but useful ninja techniques like the teleportation or some basics useful for survival. Naruto had decided to spend the first portion of his free time to prepare to the exam while he conditioned his body doing some laps, push-ups, sit-ups and abs on his yard. At the end of the first week he was happy with his progress and wanted to treat himself some ramen as a reward for his hard work. Ichiraku Ramen was the only place where he could buy things like a normal person in the village without being lied about the prices, being insulted or just thrown away. The blonde knew it wasn't fair, but it was what he had to endure and he didn't want to make a scene for that. He didn't really know what would be the Hokage's reaction if he created some problem. The blonde was welcomed at the food stand he frequented, and after telling Ayame what he wanted, he took his Gama-chan to pay, and suddenly someone moved close to him and took the stuffed wallet from his hands. When he realized who was the person in front of him, he saw a man in a ninja attire with the sleeveless jacket most of the older ninjas used. Must be a chunin or something higher, thought the blonde, watching the clearly drunk man in front of him. Give me my wallet back, shouted the blonde, annoyed at the man. Shut up, brat, you should be paying this for not killing you, demon, replied the man, checking Naruto's wallet with a mocking grin. Listen, give me my wallet and we can forget this whole thing, offered Naruto, raising his hands to appear harmless and make this man reconsider his actions. Forget the whole thing? Questioned the man, getting angry. You killed a lot of good people. That cannot be forgotten. You should be reminded every day what kind of shit you are, added the man, raising his voice and drawing some attention. Give me my wallet back, shouted Naruto, getting annoyed of being robbed and insulted while the people around just watched and did nothing. The blonde quickly dashed from his seat to the man, trying to get his wallet back, but he was just a 9-year-old academy student while the other man was around his 20s and was a chunin, so it was child's play to punch him in the face and throw him away. You just asked for a beating, demon. Learn your place, said the man, pressing his foot against Naruto's belly, who was starting to feel the lack of air. Naruto knew there was something special about him, something that made adults wary of him and something that made his anger dangerous and powerful. Usually he didn't want to hurt anyone, but today he reached his limit. He was having a good week and this people wasn't happy, just limiting his options and making his life hard. They had to just keep abusing him. Enough, shouted the blonde with a deep voice. In his mind, Naruto felt like if he was looking at a red pond at his feet, so he kneeled and put a hand in the water. The blonde was aware that pond represented all his repressed emotions, the anger, the frustration, the loneliness, but for some reason he was capable of conceptualize it in a practical way, and this time he didn't need much, just a little. Naruto felt a rush of power, but the only outside showing of his new power was the color of his eyes and the thickening of his whisker marks. He got on his feet and dashed towards the drunk ninja again, but this time with surprising speed. Now he returned the punch in the face and followed with a knee to the belly, making said chunin bend in pain. He took the wallet back from his hands and then he looked at the pained face of the man. What did you say before? Learn your place, added Naruto before slashing his face with his elongated nails, making him bleed and grab his own face on the ground. A couple of seconds later appeared a team of masked ninjas. Stop. What is happening here? Questioned the man who seemed like the leader of the group. Naruto looked at the man with a very annoyed face. ready to attack him if he said some insult. Ask this fool or any of the people around. They watched everything just like you guys and did nothing, but that shouldn't really be a surprise at this point," replied Naruto before walking past the masked ninja, ignoring him completely. He placed some money on Ichiraku's counter and apologized to Ayame for not being able to eat what he asked, but he had lost his appetite, and then he went home without looking at anyone. The Anbu were a little surprised with the 9-year-old reaction because that was completely unexpected, but after asking some witness they all said the same. The ninja robbed Naruto, and after taking a beating the blonde replied, "Got the upper hand," and kicked the Chunin's ass. At the next day, Naruto wasn't surprised of hearing a knock on his door and opening to the third Hokage. He just sighed, and before inviting him inside he needed to say something. "I'm tired, old man. I'm tired, sick to taking this villager's crap. So not anymore, I'm warning you. A fool makes something to me again, he'll regret it," threatened Naruto with a very annoyed face. "Naruto, you have to understand," the Hokage was going to try to get Naruto less aggressive, but said blonde interrupted him. "Can you tell me why all of this happens to me?" asked the blonde. He knew the adults had some info about him because they usually muttered and shouted the same things. Most went for demon, but he had heard other insults. "I can't tell you yet, it's for your own protection," tried to answer the third Hokage before being interrupted again by Naruto. "Then you can go, I feel protected enough," added the Uzumaki, finishing the talk, closing the door. He was angry and frustrated, and the only figure had supported him was not helping him, so he did not want anything with him now. The blonde was angry, frustrated, but above everything he was focused. He would devote his entire time to develop as a ninja. Being aware of the need of having strength in this harsh world, he was going to make sure to have said strength in order to protect himself now and forever, because he could not count on anyone else to do it for him. Naruto spent all the mornings training his body and his ninjutsu, leaving the afternoon to his inventions and the redesign or the flying machine. He wanted to present the blueprints to the Hokage at the moment of his exam, so he worked hard for it to be successful. He was working on some principles because if he wanted to be useful it needed to host at least a 4-man unit. Also it needed some sort of easy system of movement and a defensive system that allows the ninjas to protect the vehicle. At the academy, the other kids realized it had been a week and Naruto didn't return, so one of them asked Iruka, and the Chunin said the Hokage granted him a special permission to devote his time to other activities as long as he was able to pass the academy test along with the rest of his classmates. Some people like Sasuke or Kiba complained about favoritism, but when the teachers said the order came straight from the Hokage and if they had a problem with it they could talk to their leader, the complaints ceased. Some people missed the things he brought to the academy made by himself that were very interesting, while others just celebrated the absence of the demon boy in their room. Sarutobi was worried because of Naruto. It had been a month and the blonde had not come to sell things he found or ask him something related to his ninja training as he usually did. His Anbu had reported to him weekly about his devotion to training and the time he spent working on his things, but there were no clear results in any field yet. He had asked Jiraiya to come back and approach him, but the Sannin answered he was following a serious lead and could not return before 6 months, but by that time the blonde would already be a ninja and probably they would have another plan then. Sometimes he wondered if Kakashi would be a positive influence in Naruto's life, but the Junin was an emotional wreck and was drowning his feelings amid the Anbu's life, so he doubted his influence would be any positive to the Uzumaki. At the end of the 6 months period, Naruto appeared into Sarutobi's office. The Jinchuriki hadn't come to him since the last time they talked and he appeared to be very formal in his posture. "I've come to meet my end of the deal we had," said the Uzumaki as a greeting before placing a scroll on the Hokage's desk. He unfolded the document and saw the blueprints for a new flying machine. It was a large globe with oval shape. There was some kind of balcony at its base to keep the ninjas crewing the ship. It was kept in the air thanks to the low density of hot air with an ignition engine at its center. There was a propulsion conduct at its back to let fire and air escape and let the machine move forward, while a wheel controlled an aileron on each side to turn left or right. It had 2 cannons that used the same system as a crossbow to fire kunai with explosive notes attached to them. "I hope the design satisfies your expectations. It should be able to keep 6 to 7 people floating depending on their weight, but its optimal use is for a team of 4 ninjas. It requires a constant input of chakra, but it doesn't require it to be fire type because the engine transforms it. It has a wheel and a pedal to control direction and altitude, and finally 2 cannons to shoot explosive notes down. explained the blonde, pointing at the different parts of the machine as he talked about them. The blueprints were very precise in terms of dimensions and materials because of their properties. I'll have some people check this, but it seems impressive. Naruto, how have you been this time? Replied the Hokage, trying to recompose his relationship with the blonde. I've been very busy preparing for this day. I'm ready to take your exam, said the blonde with a face full of determination. He had thought about many possible inventions while working on some of them, but he also used a lot of time to improve his ninja skills, and now he was over any genin the old man could put against him. The Hokage's heart warmed, seeing despite his resentment his motivation was strong, so he signaled one of his Anbu agents who appeared next to him. Bring me Kanade-sensei and Izumo Kamizuki, please, asked the village's leader before addressing Naruto, who was in front of him. Kanade-sensei is the current teacher of this year promoting class, so she knows what are the standards for the graduation, and Izumo-kun is a skilled genin that has a year and a half of experience. You don't need to defeat him but to show enough combat skills to satisfy her with your performance, explained the old man to the blonde. After a couple of minutes the two mentioned people came into the room escorted by the masked ninjas. The place is ready, sir, informed one of them, making Sarutobi ask everyone present to follow his lead. Then he went to the first floor and entered a very large room. When all the people following him was already inside, he decided to speak. Well, Kanade-san, Izumo-kun, I thank you for being here. You were called because the village is in need of your services. You see young Uzumaki here, said the Hokage, pointing to Naruto, who raised his hand with a serious face. Getting two nods, he resumed his speech. I've made a bargain with Naruto and he'll be given the chance to take an early graduation test. So Kanade-sensei here will be the one who makes the assessment just on the practical portion of the test, while Izumo-kun will spar with him. His goal is not to win the fight but to prove his skills as a genin of the leaf, finished his explanation. Well, then I'll assess your skills with the 3 academy techniques and your taijutsu. Do you have any question, Uzumaki-san? Asked Kanade to the blonde, who was surprised with the politeness of the woman, but he supposed it was due to Hiruzen's presence in the room. No, I've been aware of those conditions for a while, was Naruto's response before he added something new. But I want to ask for something else, said the Uzumaki, getting the third's attention. You showed me the shadow clone technique a long time ago and I think that technique would be very useful in my workshop, so I want to know if there is anything I can do during this test to get you to teach it to me, concluded Naruto, making the old man nod. Defeat Izumo and it'll be yours, offered the Hokage, surprising the Anbu and Kanade there. They both knew Izumo was a genin with more than a year of experience. There was no way for a 9-year-old child to defeat him in combat, especially if he didn't have some kind of natural advantage like a blood limit. You got yourself a deal, old man, answered the blonde, smirking. Okay, Uzumaki-san, please show me the transformation technique, asked Kanade with a serious look, paying full attention to the blonde and the details of his appearance. Henge, shouted Naruto before transforming into Tsuchi Ichiraku. It was a figure he knew very well and one of the few people to show him respect and appreciation. The transformation was practically perfect, but she didn't know this man, so she looked at the Hokage, who nodded and assented with his head. You could use a bit less chakra in order to produce less smoke, but it seems the appearance is very close to the person you're replicating, said the instructor as feedback for the blonde. Now please make some clones, asked this time the academy teacher. Clone technique, shouted Naruto, this time creating 5 copies of himself. With all the training he did for his fire element, the blonde actually developed a nice chakra control. Good job, Uzumaki-san. You don't need any pointer there, said this time the teacher. Now I'll throw this shuriken at your direction and you have to SIWTCH position with something around you. Is that understood? Asked the woman to the blonde, who just nodded. In real life you weren't warned when to use the replacement technique, but most of her students were surprised when you threw things at them randomly. Naruto saw the incoming projectile, and when he felt it was close enough he molded chakra, and without the need of any hand sign he said, "Kawarmi," and exchanged position with the shuriken itself, staying out of harm's way. Very good, Naruto, you were able to perform the technique with a moving object without hand signs. In the future when you perform missions you need to do it without saying its name, added the woman, finishing her assessment. Naruto was a little surprised with all the constructive criticism. It was something entirely new to him and it would have been very useful during his time at the academy, but he decided to keep quiet and just nod. Now it's Izumo-kun's turn to test you, Remember, I don't care about the result, just how is your performance given the genin level you want to acquire, explained again the woman, getting another confirmation from the blonde, who exchanged a look with the third Hokage, said genin used this time to get in front of Naruto. No hard feelings? Asked the young genin to the blonde, who just looked at him with a very focused face. Hajime! Shouted the academy teacher, lowering her hand before jumping backwards. She didn't expect something so intense from a genin and a 9-year-old academy student, but it was better be safe than sorry. At first she expected young Naruto to rush on the offensive, but it seemed he had a good mindset because he waited for his opponent. He kept a standard form while he was paying attention to every movement Izumo did. The genin, on the other hand, was much more relaxed. It was clear he was underestimating his opponent. I was expecting you would take the chance, but it seems ending this match is up to me, said in a loud voice the genin before dashing towards Naruto. The blonde realized his opponent was faster than him. He blocked his first attack and tried to punch back, but his timing was off and his reflexes were too slow, so Izumo jumped away before said hit landed. Izumo tried attacking Naruto once again, but the blonde kid blocked his kick using the other arm and tried a kick this time, and although his timing was better, his speed was still too slow for him, and the already genin was capable of dodging the attack without much trouble. After those two exchanges, Naruto raised his hand, looking at the Hokage. Do I just have to defeat him? Asked for confirmation to the village's leader. Yes, Naruto, if you manage to defeat Izumo-kun by knocking him out, forcing him to give up, or Kanade-san calling the match in your favor, I'll teach you the shadow clone technique, replied the old man, using his words carefully. What are you thinking, Naruto? This doesn't look good to you, pondered the Hokage, looking at the ongoing match. Hey kid, get down of your horse, I'm no pushover, complained Izumo before reading himself to a serious fight. You asked for it. Gloves off, warned the genin before dashing towards Naruto at full speed, which was only a little faster than before. Okay, he's faster but not that much, I think I can do it, thought Naruto before moving from his position for the first time since the battle started. The 2 times prior he waited and parried his opponent's attack. This time he waited, but at the last moment he moved forward, pushing his opponent, who was starting to throw his punch. Oh, this kid is good. He faked being slower to make Izumo underestimate his speed, but he needs to capitalize his strategy now or his opponent will be ready for the attack after this, thought Kaide watching the fight. Naruto closed the space that separated Izumo and himself. The genin tried an elbow strike with the other hand, but the blonde lowered his position and attacked with a powerful uppercut, using all his body mass to enhance the strike, which made Izumo fly half a meter from the ground, but he was still in that fight because after Naruto's hit he was able to kick the Uzumaki's head, pushing him backwards. When the genin returned to the ground, he assumed a crouched position, assessing any weak points on Naruto's guard to exploit. He decided his next course of action and dashed towards the Jinchuriki again from one of his flanks, but what nobody expected was for Naruto to form a single tiger seal and perform a great fireball technique without even shouting the name of the technique. This took all the presents by surprise, especially Izumo, who saw no other choice to jump, and in that instant he saw Naruto waiting for him in mid-spin to connect with a roundhouse to his head. Seeing the hard hit Izumo took in the air before falling abruptly, Kanade-san stopped the match to check the genin's health, and then she looked at the blonde while the old Hokage watched all that with a confused expression that didn't match the smile on Naruto's face. Why are you smiling, Uzumaki-kun? Asked the teacher. Because I won the bet. The old man never said I had to beat Izumo in taijutsu. He just said I had to spar with him in order to show my abilities in taijutsu, and then he said he would teach me the jutsu if I defeated him, was Naruto's answer, which brought a smile on the Hokage and a frustrated frown from Kanade. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, I believe Uzumaki-kun is ready to be a ninja. He certainly knows how to perform the required techniques better than he showed us, is capable of elemental manipulation, and his real physical abilities are probably on the lower tier of many genin in active service, was Kanade's statement of Naruto's performance. She was still a little pissed with all the deception, but she could not ignore the cleverness of all the setup the Uzumaki did. Thank you, Kanade-san. Could you please help Izumo-kun? I have some business to settle with young Naruto, said the Hokage before motioning the Uzumaki to follow him out of the room. That was just marvelous. Naruto-kun clearly has the qualities to be a great ninja. He's very smart and able to twist words and situations to his favor. He kinds of reminds me of Kakashi. Maybe they should meet. Naruto followed the third Hokage to his office where the old man just motioned his Anbu to leave the room. Then he proceeded to activate a seal that locked the room. Anything said or done would only be known for the two of them. As a ninja you have many responsibilities, duties and privileges. One of them is information, stated the Hokage before giving Naruto a ninja headband. As the third Hokage, now I proudly name you genin of the village hidden in the leaves. May the will of fire be always with you. Added before searching a scroll in his vault and passing it to Naruto. That is your well-deserved reward, the shadow clone technique. You must remember it's forbidden for a reason and I'm only allowing this because of your particular circumstances, but you cannot teach or pass that to anyone else or they could easily die trying to perform that technique, explained the Hokage before letting the scroll in Naruto's hands. The Hokage kept silent for a moment but decided he would show his cards completely to the blonde in hopes of regaining his trust. Last time we talked you asked something and I was not able to tell you the truth, said the Hokage picking Naruto's curious gaze as he nodded. This time I'll be completely honest with you and I hope you can wait until the end before asking anything. Almost 10 years ago the Kyuubi attacked the leaf and the fourth Hokage gave his life to defeat it. You may have been told this at the academy because I made a law for this, but the truth is there are 9 creatures incredibly powerful out there called bijou. Each of them has some number of tails from 1 to 9 representing their power. They are incredibly powerful and cannot be easily killed. What many nations do is to contain and exploit their power, sealing them in a living person, turning this person into both a weapon and a sacrifice. For this reason that people are called Jinchuriki. During the night of your birth the fourth Hokage and myself took every possible precaution because childbirth is one of the few things that can weaken a Jinchuriki's seal. We don't know what happened, but for some reason the Anbu patrols securing the place were killed along my wife and the 9 tails was released into the village. Evidence point to the fact he was actually summoned into the center of the village. The fourth Hokage fought him off and took the match to the outskirts of the village to lessen the collateral damage, but in the end he decided to seal the Kyuubi within you. His last wish was for you to be seen as a hero, but after seeing the villagers' initial response to this information I made a law that forbid any person of the old generation to speak about your status as container of the Kyuubi. Unfortunately they found a way around it and despite not talking about the fox they still isolated you and treated you wrong, and for that I must beg your pardon because it's entirely my fault, finished his explanation with a sad expression on his face. Naruto was processing all this information because it was a lot to take in, but there were some things he was able to pick. First, this was completely true. The posture and vibe the old man was projecting was of pure honesty and sorrow. Also he was very sad and regretful, so it was probably a good time to drop his rancor against him. This time he was the one without words. He expected something big related to his origins, but he never suspected it could be something like this. He had just found about the tailed beasts and resulted he had the most powerful one sealed on his gut. That is the power I get from the pond. Realized the blonde, who always visualized his mind as a yard with a pond, and in that water body were the negative feelings he kept suppressed, and he already used them twice to get power. The first time was accidental at the bully that screwed his handmade toys, but the second one was conscious against the drunk ninja that attacked him on the streets. That actually explained many things for Naruto and comforted him a little, but also led to new questions, especially the one the Hokage was hoping he wouldn't ask. Why me? Said Naruto. Hiruzen took a really long breath before answering. He had decided he would tell Naruto the truth, but he didn't like it. This is the most sensitive of the secrets I've keeping from you, and before I say anything you must understand something. The law prevents anyone except for the two of us to talk about your status as a Jinchuriki, but this cannot be said outside of this office until you're at least Chunin rank or have the capability to defeat a Junin. Are we clear? Asked the Hokage, getting a nod from Naruto. He knew the blonde would accept any condition, even selling his soul to the devil for this piece of information, but he could only hope the Uzumaki was able to understand the reason for the secrecy and keep it contained. The previous container of the 9-tailed fox was Uzumaki Kushina, your mother, and the fourth Hokage's wife. They loved you with all their hearts and gave their lives so you could have a place to live and grow, even in case something happened. There were some fail-safes in place to keep the Kyuubi trapped within Kushina, but for the fourth to have sealed the Kyuubi within you there must be a good reason, but I'm afraid I don't know it, said the Hokage, revealing the last piece of information he was keeping from Naruto regarding his identity. The blonde had to take a seat this time. He looked at the ground and grabbed his head with his 2 hands. He could not believe it. The Kyuubi had been sealed within his mom before being inside him, and his father had been the hero of the leaf. The man who turned the battlefield in Konoha's favor during the last war. The man who outmaneuvered the fourth Raikage, who was supposed to be the fastest man alive. The man who defeated the Kyuubi and saved the Leaf Village, his father. He believed the news of the Kyuubi were a lot to take in, but this time the old man outdid himself. "Naruto, please say something, you're making me nervous," asked Sarutobi with a worried face. He always feared Naruto's isolation could turn him into another Orochimaru. That's why he was so intended into sending him to the academy, but after watching the results of his creations and the null social interaction he had at the academy, he wanted to make him connect with the village through other ways, but he still needed to develop those bonds in the blonde. "Thanks for being honest, I don't know how to feel. I really need some time to sort everything in my head and decide how I feel about it," replied Naruto with an absent look on his face while he walked to the door. The blonde would never remember how he arrived back to his home. So lost in his thoughts he could not register anything else. The two secrets the old man kept from him were very big, but now he understood a little why he kept that information from him for so long. A part of him even believed he wasn't ready yet, judging for the reaction he was experiencing, but it was his reality and he needed to deal with it no matter if he liked it or not. He realized it was dark outside in the village when he was finally able to think more clearly. He had reached the conclusion his father sealed the Kyuubi within him for a reason, so he could always give him the benefit of doubt, and he hoped for him to be seen as a hero. So in his mind, I wasn't his father who wronged him but the village. He mainly missed the chance to know both of his parents, but there was no point in shedding tears for that at this point. Regarding the Kyuubi, Naruto believed the most probable reason for his dad to seal the fox in him was he believed the Uzumaki would need its power in the future, which led to the logical conclusion of the third party that killed the Anbu and Sarutobi's wife during his birth. It was either a very powerful individual or a very skilled small group of people, but for his father to believe he could need the fox's power, the threat was real. That put him in a strange place because just yesterday the only desire he had for power was achieving the necessary skill level for the Hokage to accept him as a ninja. He only wanted to make inventions that would change the world and made him famous, but now it seemed there was a threat out there. A threat so powerful the incredible fourth Hokage felt the need to leave a power source for his child in order to face said threat. The blonde surprised himself, taking a long breath. If he kept that line of thought he would get crushed by the weight of the world, so he took a small pause before assessing the situation again. At this point that threat wasn't a real worry, otherwise the Hokage would know, so there was no real hurry, just the certainty about a threat to him or maybe even Konoha out there lurking somewhere in the world. So there was only one thing he could do at these moments: keep his regiment training and inventing things so he could be prepared when the time comes. Without knowing or even being his goal, the revelations Sarutobi shared with Naruto gave him a sense of transparency and the strength to face things face to face. So now he had his two advisors and old teammates Homura and Kaharu with him, along with his old-time rival Danzo. In front of him there were 4 members of the Uchiha clan. Fugaku, its current leader, and 3 elders. "Fugaku, do you know why you have been called here?" asked the Hokage with a serious voice. The clan leader took a moment to think and look around before giving his answer. "I'm afraid not, Hokage-sama. As far as I'm concerned, our negotiations had ended after the clan refused your last proposal," replied the man with a calm expression. "I see. Well, I'll be open with you. I think there has been enough secrets and threats around. We're aware of the Uchiha clan's intentions for some time and I've been your main supporter here. So I'll give you an ultimatum. If you don't find a way to keep your clan in line and accept some reasonable terms, you'll force us to take measures," finished with a very serious face. This declaration surprised greatly most parties involved. Neither the Hokage's advisors nor the Uchiha clan members expected this kind of outcome from the kind old man the third Hokage had turned into. On the other hand, Danzo was smiling. This is the resolute man who was named Hokage, thought, remembering the last time their sensei was with them. Fugaku and the other Uchiha were speechless. They were plotting against the Hokage to take the village's leadership by force from some time, but they were nowhere ready enough to put their plan in motion so soon, and this took them by surprise. "I expect your answer tomorrow morning," said, finally finishing their meeting, the Hokage before a squad of masked ninjas escorted the Uchiha members to the door. "I must say I'm very surprised for your actions tonight, but you'll have my full support. I think it was time you took some serious measures," was Danzo's comment once the 4 of them were alone. "Are you sure about this, Hiruzen?" asked Kaharu. "We don't know if provoking them right now could hasten their actions," added the woman to make her point clearer. Sarutobi walked to the window to see the dark forms of the village. Today I talked with Naruto Uzumaki, told him the whole truth regarding his parents and his status as a demon container. I expected him to hate his father or the village. He certainly has some reasons for that, but instead he thanked me, and without knowing it he lifted a great weight from my mind. That gave me the idea of facing this situation face to face. I already talked to the Junin commander Shikaku and Anbu commander Inu to ensure the village is prepared in case something happened, but I believe this is the most effective way to deal with the situation, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed," explained the third Hokage with a smile on his face. "Hiruzen, how could you be so irresponsible disclosing such topics with a 9-year-old child?" questioned Homura, who viewed Naruto as a trouble good-for-nothing child. "Careful Homura, this is not the kind old man you used to boss. This is the man who was appointed Hokage by Tobirama-sensei," replied Danzo, surprising the other 3 people in the room. "You see Hiruzen, for years, probably since you took the hat from Minato-kun, you have been merely a shadow of your former self. The Hyuga Kumo incident and now the negotiations with the Uchiha were examples of how your avoidance of conflict usually led to inaction, which was exploited by more resolute people. Now you're acting like the man who was ready to fight the Kinkaku force and even going against sensei's orders. This is the man I respect, and for that you have my full support," finished the old warhawk, surprising Homura and Kaharu, who were aware of the plotting Danzo did behind Sarutobi's back. It seems this Naruto Uzumaki must be an interesting character if he was able to bring the old Hiruzen back. Maybe I'll pay him a visit in the future, added before leaving the room. "Well, it seems the decisions had been already taken, so we're not needed here. Be ready for what they may bring, old friend," were Homura's words before leaving. "I sincerely hope this is the best path for everyone in the village. I really do," said Kaharu, following Homura out of the room. It had been a month since the day of truth and revelations, and things in the Leaf Village seemed well. The Uchiha clan, forced to decide something, asked for 3 things. The ability to have a compound just along the rest of the clans, to not being on constant surveillance by the Anbu, and to have a clear understanding of the jurisdictions and attributions to the Uchiha police and the Anbu forces. The first point was easy to implement. The second had to be negotiated, and some hand-picked members of the Uchiha hierarchy would have an Anbu tail for a while to make sure they followed their end of the deal, and the last one required some work but was doable. In the end, the Uchiha only wanted some more respect and not being seen as if their efforts were in vain, because many times the Anbu interfered with their work. So between the Uchiha clan leader, the Junin commander, the Anbu commander and the Hokage, a new document was created to define the roles of each security organization within the village. It was true there could be conflicts later, but as long as each of the parts was willing to expose those conflicts when they appeared, future issues would be solved. There were some ruckus and rumors in the village during all his period, but in the end it was just that. After all, a clan so large as the Uchiha moving from their ancestral lands to the residential section of the village was something that surprised everybody, but after a while people got used to that and things got back to normal with time. Obviously not all the Uchiha were happy with his development, but a considerable amount of people, civilian and ninjas from the clan, were satisfied. They didn't want power or dominance. They only felt they deserved some respect, and now they were getting it. So the desire to control the village was something only a small group of individuals wanted, but without crowd support it was impossible to achieve, so they would have to settle with that they got. Other of the measures Sarutobi did that night was in action now. Naruto heard someone knocking at his door, so he raised from his desk and went to open. At first he was surprised to find a single Anbu member at his door. "Naruto-san, I'm Inu. The Hokage asked me to come to you once a month and have a spar with you, allowing me to give any pointers I think would be beneficial to you," explained the Anbu to the blonde, who smiled. "I don't know if the old man realizes how helpful this is regarding the threat out there, but I'll not miss this opportunity," thought the blonde for a moment while he smiled. "Sure. Let me get in proper clothes?" asked the blonde before going inside for a moment. Kakashi stood at the door and couldn't help but bend a little to look inside. The place seemed clean and the desk was filled with papers and small pieces of metal in all shapes. There was a whiteboard with some notes and some scrolls around. "It seems Naruto is doing fine. I don't know what the Hokage must be thinking allowing a child so young to graduate from the academy in peacetime, but surely there must be a reason," pondered Kakashi, looking Naruto's home from his door. They went to a vacant training ground reserved by the Hokage for this. Kakashi asked Naruto to use all the skills he was able to come up with something useful for him, and the blonde was waiting for a chance to test himself, so he did as he was told. At first Naruto charged towards his rival. His taijutsu was slow but his strength was above average. The blonde had good instincts but he clearly lacked combat experience although his body learned quickly after some beatings. What impressed him was his skill in fire manipulation because he was able to cast powerful fire techniques with a single tiger hand seal. He didn't need to shout the name or do any more seals. Just the last one and he was able to perform the large fireball technique, the phoenix flower technique and even the fire dragon technique which was an A-rank ninjutsu. After beating Naruto, Kakashi offered some tips and things the blonde should consider honing his skills. The blonde thanked him for his time and returned home. During the fourth of their monthly spars Naruto explained he had never wanted to be a powerful ninja, instead he wanted to be an inventor and create things that would change the world and make him famous, so Kakashi proposed he created something that enhanced his skills in combat, from a weapon to a support device. The Uzumaki had considered this before but he had never the determination to do it. The next month the blonde brought a sword he had made, but despite being a good forged sword, the blonde didn't have the skills to use it efficiently. Then Kakashi suggested some kind of non-weapon device and Naruto spent a month on it. After that he tried his most recent invention, the portable shield, a piece of metal with some seals on it that worked as a barrier. That by itself wasn't that surprising. The useful of this creation was the fact he did some clones to block the attacks that came his way, and it was useful for long-range attacks, but it did nothing when a more skilled opponent got close to him. It was the sixth of their meetings and Naruto had opened up a little with Inu, who still kept his identity a secret from him. During one of their talks the Anbu asked if he was aware of other affinity besides fire to broaden his repertoire, and the Uzumaki showed no idea what he was talking about. Kakashi asked how he decided to learn fire techniques then, and the blonde replied he wanted to forge his own metal pieces, which left Kakashi surprised and without words. He could be facing a 10-year-old kid capable of using A-rank fire techniques without even the affinity for them, so he did a motion with his hand and two more Anbu appeared. "I need 2 pieces of chakra paper," asked the masked ninja. "Yes, sir," replied the 2 agents before disappearing. "Are they always watching us?" asked a curious Naruto. "Yes, but they follow me, not you. Also I've ordered them to stay out of hearing range so they can only watch us from a long distance," replied Kakashi with a relaxed voice. "So, are you some kind of high-rank member in the Anbu forces?" questioned again the blonde. "You are very smart, Naruto." "Yes, I'm actually the current commander," replied, ruffing the blonde's hair for a moment before they both stopped in their tracks. It was the first time they had any kind of physical contact outside of their spars, more so it was a sign of affection. No one said a thing but both stood there in silence until the masked ninja returned with the object. "Naruto, this is a paper made from trees fed with chakra, so it's highly sensitive to the nature of the chakra it receives. If you channel your chakra through this it's going to have a different reaction, so it's used to identify a person's natural affinity. That doesn't mean you can only learn or perform techniques from said affinity, but the techniques in your element will be easier to pick and more powerful when you cast them. On the other hand, the further an element is from your affinity the harder it'll be to master that element, and you'll need more chakra to make those techniques powerful," explained Kakashi, holding a paper between his fingers. He applied some chakra to it and it crumbled. "You see? This is the typical response for a lightning user is me. But despite being a natural lightning user at this moment I can perform techniques from other 3 elements," added the copy ninja to make Naruto understand his point. "Okay, so this doesn't determine what techniques I'll be able to learn but what will come easier and more powerful, right?" asked Naruto for confirmation of the things he picked from Kakashi's speech. "You're right, Naruto. Now channel some of your chakra to the paper," instructed the Anbu to the blonde, who did as told, and to Kakashi's surprise it sliced in 2 right in the middle. "What does this mean?" asked Naruto with a curious face. He was expecting some fire-aligned reaction. "It means you're a wind type. That's actually the furthest from fire element you can be, which means you're very talented to be able of performing the fire techniques you do being so young. If you train your wind affinity through some exercises you'll be able to learn or create wind jutsus in the future, along with other perks it has," said Kakashi, adding about enhancing weapons with elemental chakra and also explaining the other possible reactions of the paper to other elements. Naruto was kind of amazed because from Kakashi's words what he did was extremely difficult, so either he was talented in ninjutsu or he had just that good luck. At the end of the day Kakashi explained to the Uzumaki the exercise required to develop his wind type element before learning techniques from that element. Kakashi had to report a summary of his spars with Naruto to the Hokage, so he naturally told him about the result of the test and he was very surprised. "He really must take after his father then," said the old man, making Kakashi's eyes wide. "No, it's not like that. They both are incredible smart, but there is a central difference that sets them aside. Minato-sensei was a collected person who faced any challenge with the premise that if it could be solved, he should be able to do it. He had confidence any person who put his mind to it could achieve great things. Naruto on the other hand faces everything as a riddle, or a puzzle. His mind is constantly wandering around the mysteries and the unresolved things. His curiosity pushed him forward. If I had to define them, Minato-sensei was a confident man while Naruto is a curious one. I wonder how far will Naruto's go in the world, thought Kakashi for a while. Something on your mind, Kakashi? Asked the Hokage. No, Lord Third. I'll take my leave, said Kakashi before teleporting away from the Hokage's office while said man smirked behind his seat. It seemed his plan was working. Kakashi was opening up to Naruto little by little through the connection to his father, and the blonde had someone besides him he could count on in case of needing something. And with that, things in the Leaf Village kept on its right course. The tensions with the Uchiha clan ceased while the villagers were ignorant of the whole ordeal. The ninjas kept doing missions and the newer generations grew with every passing day. And speaking of new generations, Naruto Uzumaki was already 11 years old. His first major invention, the flying machine, was a complete success. The third Hokage had tested the machine in different situations and it proved to be a great asset, so now the Leaf Village had 6 of them in their possession and 2 more were being built. 3 of them were constantly patrolling the Fire Country while the other 3 were in reserve. The blonde had developed a seal in every headband for the team leaders to send a distress signal to the air in case something went wrong. It could alert the enemy of their position but also allowed for the aerial support to arrive in a timely fashion. Another of his inventions was a reinforced seal for the barrier around the village. Before, it only acted as a detection field that allowed the barrier team know about all the people that entered the village and some notable chakra spikes from the inside. Now it had 2 more functions. A defensive barrier that created a powerful shield around the village forbidding anyone or anything to enter, and an offensive shield that kept the village in lock without allowing anyone to get away. The best part of the barrier was the fact it was only unidirectional. The defensive barrier allowed for people to get away but stopped people from entering, while the offensive barrier allowed people to enter but kept any invader or attacker trapped inside. The barrier was powered by Naruto and Hiruzen's chakra, but the seals were designed to be managed by anyone using the already existing devices the barrier team used. It only added 2 more functions. All of this allowed for the blonde to get substantial amounts of money, but he didn't have anything he wanted, so he just used some of it to buy a yard next to his and some materials to work. He had been studying seals and it seemed his Uzumaki genes were kicking in because he was very good at them. After almost 2 years he was ahead of many people, and in just a year more of 2 he could be considered a master. Naruto was progressing well in his ninja training. He had already shared his beliefs about the Kyuubi and his father with Kakashi, but neither of them had discussed those topics with the Hokage. Currently the Jinchuriki was able to use wind styles techniques with even more ease than he used fire, but Kakashi advised him to develop both elements. A ninja needed to be resourceful and both were aware of the dangers of the world. After talking about the reasons for Minato to leave the Kyuubi sealed within Naruto, even Kakashi realized he needed to get stronger if he hoped to protect Naruto in the future, so after the first years of their spars he quit Anbu and came back to the life as a Junin. He still did some long missions but usually was around the village to talk more often with the blonde or train for himself. The Uchiha clan had adjusted well to their new living arrangements and now shared a common neighborhood with other clans like the Nara and the Inuzuka, who also had large territories. Itachi and Shisui were taking more central roles within the clan as per request of the Hokage's advisors, who wanted Fugaku and the clan elders to step down and find more trustworthy people to lead the clan. Some people resented these decisions, but the clear majority of the clan supported it, so there was no hate to instigate for the masked man whispering in some people's ears. For some reason, the third Hokage had stopped his plans for good, so he decided to drop the whole thing. As a ninja, the Hokage had asked in a few occasions for Naruto to do some missions. He wasn't usually called, but when there was something with potential scientifically valuable he was called as an expert. The first time was to examine the effects of a weird meteorite that boosted the power of the village's ninjas, so the Hokage sent a team of ninjas accompanied with Naruto and a medic ninja to study the phenomenon. Resulted the rock's radiation was toxic for the human body, and while it conferred a powerful energy, it also killed the person the more he used it. The village leader was concerned with this because they had thought this power source could boost their village's reputation among the other villages, so the blonde Uzumaki proposed it could be used as something reserved only to the leader or a selected few to train and hone these powers in hopes of not having to use them except by life or death situations, but still having a hidden ace in case of need. The man loved the idea and thanked Naruto for it. The medic complained a little, but there was precedent of something similar with the hero's water from the village hidden by the waterfall, so his words were unheard. The second time Sarutobi asked Naruto to participate on a mission was to explore a facility his ninjas believed could have belonged to Orochimaru. The blonde studied the place and was disgusted with the man's work. His signature was in all the experiments here because they tried to fuse special traits among species, although he had to admit he could use equipment as good as the one the snake used. This was also the first time Naruto fought against an enemy who wanted to cause him real harm, but the rest of the team, all higher in rank than the young genin, were impressed by his ability with fire techniques. He had dealt with his enemy saturating the place with fire and suffocating them in a narrow corridor. One of the Junin had reported smart and brutal, kind of Orochimaru's style, but the old man was aware this was one of the many people who viewed Naruto as nothing more than the fox in disguise. The third time he was asked to go with Kakashi and other ninja to the land of snow. He was chosen because Kakashi would be there and they wanted to prove a way to transport people using the flying machine he built, so he was there in case something went wrong with the machine. The person they were escorting was a famous actress, and in the end they helped her and the people protecting her to overthrow her evil uncle who ruled her old country after betraying her father for the throne. What surprised everybody was the fact the land of snow turned into the land of spring thanks to the heat generators, and there was no need to say how interested Naruto was in learning all he could about the incredible technology the village had. Those chakra armors were something he had dreamed about, but to see that in action was incredible. He had even been allowed to keep the broken ones dodo, and his men used to study and reverse engineer them as a thank you for his role in the emotional support he offered during the whole ordeal. The blonde was marveled at how they had their own flying machines with a design very different to his, the train and many other things. He wrote a lot in his notebook to further research when he returned and said goodbye to Koyuki and the rest of the crew. This time it was Kakashi who praised Naruto's skills, putting him at Chunin level in terms of combat abilities. His fire mastery along his other techniques were a crucial factor in a place where the ice was the main weapon, due to the artificial nature of the ice provided by the chakra armors. A strong fire technique could melt it, so Naruto and Kakashi were the heavy hitters of the team. By now Naruto was 12 years old. The other academy students he met during his time there were now genin in active duty, and even Kakashi took a team of them for the first time. He had Sasuke Uchiha, Hinata Hyuga and Shino Aburame under his care, and while they weren't the most socially engaged group of people, they were a cohesive unit that cared for each other. Currently they had been a team for 3 months and were doing a C-rank mission. There was a small village close to the frontier of the fire and wind countries which was known for its mines rich in minerals. A few days ago there were some tremors and 2 workers were trapped inside, so the chief hired a team of Konoha's ninjas to rescue them. When they arrived to the village, the elder in charge and the engineer-in-chief who was in charge of the workers at the mine received them with open arms. Kakashi put he and his team to work immediately because with people trapped every moment could be fatal. Hinata's Byakugan proved to be an incredible asset because she was able to locate the 2 missing people who were very much alive, and Shino was able to secure some small holes for them to have a guaranteed supply of oxygen. He was assessing the mountain structure to use his lightning blade for rescuing the trapped workers. He was using his lightning chakra with surgical precision when another tremor was felt, and capitalizing his lack of footing, someone hit him with a sphere of mud. "Team, get cover!" shouted Kakashi before a man appeared between his students, kicking a surprised Shino and Hinata, while Sasuke activated his Sharingan to face the large man attacking his teammates. He felt a movement around him and crouched to avoid a hit to his face, then kicked the figure, feeling a hard feeling before jumping away and lifting his headband. "Oh. It's Gantetsu, the Dark Shinobi," said the copy ninja after identifying his adversary. "It's the legendary Dark Shinobi, copy ninja," corrected him the missing ninja from the rock village. "Damn, this guy's supposed to have the ability to harden his skin to make it as hard as steel," thought Kakashi, caressing for the leg he used to kick him. He looked around to see Sasuke bruised but still on his foot while Hinata was raising from the ground and Shino seemed a bit more hurt. Another movement took his attention away from his students as his enemy charged at him again. This time Kakashi just avoided him because a physical attack would only hurt him in the end. "Don't take your eyes off me or it could be the last mistake you make," warned the missing ninja before doing some hand seals, earth-style black spikes. Said, and suddenly the place where Kakashi was got filled with dangerous pieces of a black rock with the same consistency his skin had. The missing ninja kept charging at Kakashi, who didn't have any option but to dodge and jump away. The loose rocks and constant spikes his enemy raised kept him from taking the race he needed for the Reikiri, and he doubted his long-distance version would have enough power to pierce his black skin. The copy ninja tried with some fireballs and even some earth techniques, but none of them was able to stop the black ninja, who just shrugged every ninjutsu thrown his way. A short glance at his team confirmed him they weren't doing much better. His teamwork probably gave them a chance. But that man must be a Chunin-level ninja because of the skills he showed with earth-style techniques. Sasuke was reacting better thanks to his Sharingan, but Hinata had trouble getting close to strike at him, and Shino seemed to have a broken arm for how it was hanging from his shoulder, but he still provided some long-range support with his insects. "Lightning style. Lightning beast tracking Fang," said Kakashi to his enemy, making a hound of pure lightning dashing towards his opponent, who was surprised with its speed and could not avoid the jutsu. But despite being at elemental disadvantage, it only gave him a medium-intensity shock. It was unpleasant but nothing harmful. "Nice try, Kakashi Hitaki. This is my maximum sturdiness," said Gantetsu before showing his right arm, which got slightly enlarged, adopting a club-like shape. He ran towards Kakashi one more time and focusing all the chakra he could. The Leaf Junin braced the hit to his midsection. He felt many of his ribs breaking, but he grabbed his enemy to use his lightning blade and pierce him. Due to the hit he took, he wasn't able to aim well and could only pierce his stomach. Choseki heard his brother's scream of pain and left his fight. The Uchiha posed a nice adversary now that his body was getting used to his speed, but he lacked the firepower to hurt him. The other two were even more harmless to him. He threw some rocks at Kakashi, who received most of them on the back, and took his brother, who was bleeding, on the ground before leaving the place swearing vengeance. Kakashi coughed some blood. He got up from his position towards his team. Hinata was mostly fine. Shino had a broken arm and Sasuke was fully covered in bruises with his cheek and eye swollen, but nothing too serious. "Sensei, are you okay?" asked Hinata. "My life is not in danger, but I'm not in fighting shape, plus we still need to rescue those workers," said, coughing some more blood much to Hinata's worry. "I need to call for help," added before collecting some of the blood he had thrown. "But Kakashi-sensei, it took us 2 days to arrive here," replied Shino while Kakashi did some seals. "Summoning technique," shouted Kakashi. "Yo," said Pakun, greeting the group. "Kakashi, what happened to you?" asked the dog, concerned. "A dog? Is our reinforcement?" was the common thought in the three genin minds. "Pakun, I need you to call Naruto. We got to fight some missing ninja, but we still need to rescue some people, and I'm not in any shape to fight if it comes to that," explained the copy ninja to his companion, who nodded. "Naruto, as in Uzumaki Naruto?" wondered Hinata, hearing his words. "Reverse summoning," conjured Pakun while he stood over an open scroll with his frontal legs together. A cloud of smoke appeared around them, and then a blonde boy around their same age was visible for the whole group. He had a white coat and a standard black ninja uniform under that. On his belt was a headband with the symbol of the leaf, and he showed a carefree attitude much like Kakashi's. "Pakun, why did wait, Kakashi, what happened?" asked Naruto, watching the crouched form of his friend teacher older brother figure. "We were trying to rescue some miners, and 2 missing ninjas from the rock village attacked us. I managed to injure one of them, but the other took him away, and the workers still need to be rescued. I called you here to help us," explained the copy ninja, getting a nod from Naruto. Without saying a word, he created 3 copies of himself. 2 went to lift Kakashi while the other offered to carry Shino, but the Aburame declined. "Hyuga-san, please show me where are the miners. The rest can go with my doppelgangers to get some help," ordered Naruto. Hinata nodded immediately. Shino also agreed with him because it was the most logical course of action. Sasuke wanted to argue this boy was no one to boss them around, but he was in too much pain for that. He needed to be checked, and the sooner the better. Hinata led Naruto towards the mine. She signaled the place where the miners were trapped. She was grateful they weren't hurt by the last tremors and their previous fights. Naruto looked around and asked about critical point for weight support to Hinata, and she tried to help as much as she could. Naruto believed he needed to take away all the loose rocks before attempting to get the workers out of that place, so he raised his hands and created 10 chakra threads and used them to remove the rocks. Hinata was using her Byakugan, so she was able to see the thin chakra constructs Naruto made and when any of them attached itself to a rock. The blonde was able to move it at will controlled by this string, so 10 at a time Naruto was able to remove the superficial rocks. I'll create a tunnel from this place to the workers' location, but I need you to tell me if I'm too close to them or if the rocks around start collapsing again, right? Asked the blonde, getting an affirmation from the girl who was amazed at how Naruto managed the whole operation. Naruto this time put his hands on the ground and a large number of chains came out from his sleeves and buried themselves into the ground. His plan was to make a cylindrical hole under the mine to not weaken its support. He used a lot of chakra to create a great amount of chains because he needed a tunnel wide enough for a person to pass through it. After a while Hinata could see him sweating because of the accuracy he needed. He had to use a large amount of chakra and focus. Some minutes later he looked at Hinata and she signaled he needed to go higher. He did until she warned him he had already reached them. At this moment he dissipated most of the chains except for the ones at the border of the lot, keeping a cylindrical tunnel composed by one single layer of his chains. Tell them to use the tunnel and warn me if something happens, asked this time the blonde to the Hyuga, who gave the instructions to the workers and helped them raise when they were at the reach of her hand. She was helping one of them to get back at his feet when they were surprised by some people clapping. Both Konoha Genin turned around to see the engineer-in-chief and some family members of the trapped workers cheering and thanking them for releasing their workers, spouses or friends. I already know what happened, and despite the threat you and your people face, you still managed to help our people, and for that you have our never-ending gratitude, said the chief, bowing to Naruto and Hinata. You have nothing to thank, it's our duty to help people in need if it's within our capabilities, replied Naruto before grabbing Hinata's shoulder and leading her back to the rest of her team. The small village had a clinic that worked as a hospital. It had around 10 beds and a couple of doctors, but fortunately that had been enough to help the Leaf Ninjas and the trapped workers. It had been a week since Naruto was called there and the other events prior to his summoning. Kakashi and he talked about the fight. The Junin explained his opponent didn't have that impressive skills, but the terrain was difficult for him to fight on and the only technique that made him famous was troublesome to get around. His Reikiri was the only technique with enough piercing power to pass through his black skin, but in a terrain so unstable he had to allow him to land a hit to be able to strike him back. He expected Gantetsu to be in a similar shape to his because he was sure he pierced his stomach completely, but he didn't expect the man to die from that wound. When Naruto asked about the brother, Shino and Hinata told him he was a large man with powerful strikes that based his style in using his long-distance attacks to cover his moves and capitalize with potent strikes. He didn't seem nothing out of the ordinary but was a strong rock ninja. Sasuke on the other hand was busy training himself to the ground. He didn't want to get defeated by a loser like that again. He was able to realize the two missing ninja were brothers and they were stuck with the loser won and lost against him, just like Itachi and him, the genius and the common one. At this moment Naruto was sitting on the clinic's roof with Shino and Hinata while the three of them watched as Sasuke trained at the back of the clinic. He was trying to improve his fire jutsus to give them more power. Excuse me, were you at the academy with us? Asked a shy Hinata, who remembered that never give up attitude from the blonde. I also believe you were with us during the first year, added Shino, adjusting his glasses. It surprises me you two remember. No one paid any attention to me, but yes, I entered the academy with all of your generation, but after a couple of months the Hokage allowed me to drop if I fulfilled some requisites, replied Naruto with a neutral tone. He wasn't complaining, just remembering. Naruto remembered the time where he was at the academy and despite his efforts nobody talked to him or helped him when he needed something. At first he left to work on his creations, and when he convinced the Hokage with his first flying prototype he was allowed to drop out entirely. Why did you leave? Asked Shino this time. Because no one talked to me and I found working on my creations was more interesting, was the Uzumaki's answer that made both clan heirs get silent in that spot. For them the academy was a place to grow and share with others in their same position. For the blonde it was a place of isolation and boredom. You're adding more chakra, it'll only make it broader. You need to compress the chakra if you want your techniques to be more powerful, said Naruto in a loud voice, surprising the other three genin. And what do you know? In case you weren't aware, this technique is the signature of the Uchiha clan and I've been able to perform it for years," replied Sasuke, talking about the great fireball technique. Naruto took a deep breath in annoyance and doing a single tiger seal did the mentioned technique, creating a larger and more powerful fire sphere than the Uchiha did, leaving everyone looking at Sasuke wondering what would be his reaction. When they looked at the blonde again, he was already gone from the roof. Kakashi had said these men could come back, so he wanted to spend some time there recovering in case they returned. The village elder had said a couple of weeks ago the two of them appeared in his office threatening to harm the people of the village if he didn't tell the workers to abandon the mine. They tried the same with the chief, but he didn't even listen to them, so attacking seemed like the only logical step. Naruto believed after hearing Kakashi's explanation he could take on the black shinobi guy, and he hoped Sasuke and Hinata were able to defeat his brother if they had to fight again, so for the meanwhile they would keep watch over this village to protect them in case the missing ninja returned. After 2 weeks Kakashi was back on his feet. He could move, walk and use his chakra, but he still felt it was dangerous for him to fight seriously because his ribs were just mending. With any kind of force they would break again, but he didn't want to leave the place because he suspected those guys could return and he wanted to protect these people. He was walking around the village when he felt a chakra spike. It was at the outskirts of the city, so he supposed they rogue ninjas were back. "Don't rush things up," shouted Naruto running past him. He was being followed by Sasuke and Hinata. Good, it seemed his students trusted in him by now. He tried to move as fast as his body allowed him. When he arrived, Sasuke and Hinata were trying to fight Choseki. The man was showing some bruises this time, which meant his students were getting better, but instead he decided to stick at long-range ninjutsu, where earth users used to triumph over fire users and members of the Hyuga clan. "Lightning style. Lightning beast tracking fang," said Kakashi, surprising everybody. The electrical hound chased after the Iwa ninja at blinding speeds, shocking him and inflicting a lot of damage, so a single kunai to his chest thrown by the copy ninja was able to do the trick. He searched for Naruto and found him fighting around the mountain. The same mountain where he fought against that ninja, but there was a difference. Naruto was more resourceful than him despite his 1,000 copied techniques. Naruto could stop his attacks using his chains. He could also use them to raise himself from the ground level. He couldn't fly on his own, but he could step on them to get higher than the spikes could reach. Kakashi could see Gantetsu getting frustrated with each second he couldn't harm Naruto. The blonde on the other hand was just testing the man, measuring his own capabilities against his. Kakashi and Naruto were able to see the victory was at his reach, but the blonde was using this chance to see how he fared against an enemy shinobi. This man seemed like a Chunin level ninja with some nice tricks, but Naruto was around the same level and his tricks were better. "Okay. Time to finish you off," said the blonde with a bored tone that irked his adversary. He ran towards Naruto with his full body covered in black skin, but Naruto used 2 chains from each sleeve to grab each one of his limbs and suspend him into the air. "Fool, no matter how hard you push you'll not able to harm me while I'm in this form," shouted the renegade ninja. "As much as I would like to prove you wrong, I don't need that to kill you," replied Naruto, doing the same move he did on the clinic's roof. He did a single tiger seal and fired a hot stream of flames towards his adversary. What surprised Sasuke was the fact he didn't stop. He kept the fire technique for 2 minutes until his opponent's chakra signature disappeared, which spoke wonders of Naruto's chakra and mastery over the fire element. Kakashi walked past his students to see Naruto. "Are you okay?" asked the copy ninja. "Yeah, you already described his fighting style, so it was easy to figure a way to fight him efficiently," replied Naruto before seeing the 2 missing ninja dead. "Can we go back to the leaf now?" asked the blonde. He knew Kakashi wanted to protect the village, and while he didn't care much he could empathize with the Junin for wanting to help. Kakashi just asked for someone to get Shino, so the blonde created a doppelganger and went for the Aburame boy. Hinata expressed her concern for Kakashi to travel after his injury, but the Junin said there was no need to worry because Naruto would take care. Both Hinata and Sasuke were very confused until the blonde opened 3 scrolls on the ground. "Sealing technique. Release," shouted the Uzumaki before something massive appeared next to the mountain. "One of the flying machines?" asked Hinata, who didn't believe Naruto could have one. "No, they're not that big. This must be 2 times longer," replied Sasuke, who was pretty amazed when the Hokage showed the 3 flying ships that would patrol the country. "Ha ha ha, it's an innocent mistake, but this is no ordinary vehicle. This is the Sky Regent, 2.5 times longer and 1.8 times higher than a normal flying device. And if you're wondering how I have one of these, that's simple, I'm the person who invented them after all, said Naruto, making a mad scientist pose but with a proud smile on his face. You? Both Sasuke and Hinata shouted in surprise. Those machines were the most revolutionary invention in ages, and they came from this blonde boy who was the same age as them. That didn't seem possible at all. Wait, you always brought cool things to the academy, little vehicles and machines, added Hinata, remembering those old days. You paid attention to me? Wondered a very surprised Naruto. How? I mean, you have the same age as us. How could you come up with something like this? Questioned Sasuke. He knew this wasn't something that made Naruto powerful, but it clearly made him special, and he wanted to find out how he achieved that. To be honest, I don't know. Once I created my first handmade toy, I felt joy at making things with my own 2 hands, replied Naruto, raising his hand to the sun. Then I felt curiosity for some things and took all the steps I believed could lead me to that goal. For example, I wanted to forge my own metal, so I trained until I was capable of using fire jutsus when I was 9. Explained the Uzumaki, making the Uchiha's eyes go wide. He learnt the great fireball technique around that age, but he never suspected another person outside of the Uchiha clan having that skill. What could this possibly mean about Naruto? It feels as if I've been cast aside from something important, was Shino's greeting that prompted a moment of silence between the other genin, including Naruto, who didn't want to make Shino feel sad. Summarizing, Naruto created the flying machines the village uses and is going to take us back to the leaf in one of them, explained Kakashi, trying to help mending the mood. Oh, that certainly is remarkable, was Shino's reaction before asking the blonde how to go inside. In the end, Kakashi went to gather the village elder and explained to him the threat had been eliminated, so now they could leave and work with the same peace as they ever did. The villagers were very grateful with the leaf ninjas and thanked them. Then all members of Team 7 boarded on Naruto's flying machine and went back to the leaf. Sasuke was studying the vehicle with a critical eye. He didn't understood much, but he was able to see the metal composing the globe was much sturdier, and there were 4 control points besides the central one for the person navigating the ship. Later, Naruto explained he did many modifications from the original design based on his own chakra capabilities and skills. The standard ship was made to be piloted by any ninja without expending too much chakra because it could be an obstacle if he had to fight, while this one was made to work with a larger amount of chakra, but the blonde had a lot to spare, and after watching his performance during the fight against the rock ninjas, Sasuke had no doubt about that. The Uchiha had followed Naruto's advice and compressed the chakra for his great fireball technique, but it was smaller than before and did the same damage but in a closer area. Then he realized adding more chakra but keeping the compression was enough to make the jutsu have the same reach as previous but with at least twice as much power. The only problem was the fact it also used twice as much chakra, so he needed to be very accurate when using it. Naruto casted a long-range fire jutsu and kept it unwavering for 2 whole minutes besides the use of those chains of his. The blonde was clearly a powerhouse type of ninja, but for some reason his control over fire seemed superb. What kind of ninja are you, Naruto? Questioned Sasuke during their journey back to the village. None, replied Naruto, confusing Sasuke. Kakashi was close, so he was able to hear, and he already knew the Uzumaki's character well enough to understand that answer. I never wanted to be a ninja. I just want to invent things, but I've had to learn the things I believe will allow me to make and use better inventions, added Naruto to explain his first answer, and also to be ready when the threat who faced my father comes back, added the Uzumaki on his mind. Just like that, a journey that took Team Kakashi 2 days the first time was covered by Naruto's flying machine in 20 hours. They landed into the ground at the outsides of the village, and no one activated the alarms because they already knew about Naruto's personal vehicle, and the possibility he created more in the future. A few minutes later, the whole group was in the Hokage office, and said man was quite confused at seeing Naruto along with Kakashi's team, so he asked the copy ninja for his report, and then he understood how the blonde got there. He was pleased because the Junin ensured his team's safety to the best of his ability and managed to complete the mission without losing anyone. He would still need a week or so without hard efforts, while Shino probably would take twice that much time, but the Aburame could always train with their insects or just some chakra exercises, so for them the recovery time was always useful. When Kakashi finished his report, he asked the genin if any of them wanted to add something, but they seemed to agree with their teacher, which showed Naruto did a very job with them during the mission. Because according to the Junin's report, he took a role of leadership, and if he had to guess, it would be based on his skills and power. Well, Team Kakashi, you earned a payment equivalent to a B-rank mission, and that also includes you, Naruto, informed the Hokage, surprising the blonde. I thank you for supporting Kakashi and his team. Now all of you have a week off, and I expect to hear from Shino's recovery in the meantime. Instructed the village's leader before asking all of them but Naruto to go. There is a person I'd like to introduce you, added the village's leader before taking the Uzumaki for a walk. The Jinchuriki was a little confused when the Hokage led him towards the village's hot springs. They were talking about the last mission because the old man was impressed with Naruto's performance because, as the blonde itself said many times in the past, he wasn't a ninja nor he did want to be one. He only trained and honed his skills in order to have a greater success as an inventor and also to have the strength to protect his creations, but many things like stealth and underhand tactics that pretty much every ninja knew were things that didn't interest him. They arrived at their destiny and saw a large white-haired man who was trying to watch to the women's side with a small telescope. The Hokage cleared his throat, getting this man's attention. Jiraiya-kun, I brought young Naruto here, introduced the old man. Naruto, this is one of my students, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, added Hiruzen, getting them to know each other before leaving the place. Mister, are you some kind of pervert? Asked a confused Naruto, who didn't know what to expect from a man like that. On one side he was a student of the Hokage and he knew about the 3 legendary ninja, but on the other he was peeping at the women's side of the hot springs. Ha 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 ha, it's normal for a kid like you to make the mistake of thinking I may be a simple pervert, but you're wrong, I'm a super pervert. I gather information about the wonders of woman body all through the elemental nations, stated the white-haired Sannin with pride in his eyes, making Naruto very confused because he didn't understand how that was any better. The two of them walked away from the hot springs towards a small store close to the forest. There Jiraiya sat and talked to Naruto, explaining him about his relationship with the blonde and what he had been doing during this time. The Sannin was able to tell Naruto wasn't used being close with adult people because while he listened with attention he didn't seem personally invested. So they talked for a long time to know each other, and Jiraiya was marveled at how Naruto's mind worked. He told the Uzumaki all the things he had already accomplished were incredibly great for a 12 years old, so he should also be proud of his success so far. The blonde also asked some things to the Toad Sage about his own life and the styles he preferred as a ninja. After talking about themselves, the young Uzumaki asked about his parents, and this was how Jiraiya got his way into Naruto's heart. He told the blonde many stories about the two of them and how they seemed incredibly happy when they found Kushina was pregnant. He even gave the blonde a copy of the book, Tale of the Gusty Ninja, where the name Naruto was first introduced. He explained to the Jinchuriki that his father named him after the main character, hoping he would inherit some of the traits he showed, in particular his perseverance and his hopes to make the world a better place. When Naruto found about his parents and the Kyuubi from the old Hokage, he felt overwhelmed by all the new information. When he looked at it with a clear mind, nothing changed currently in his life, but it explained how he came to his current situation, and it was a real eye-opener. The most he felt after learning the truth was a great weight lifted from his shoulders. Now hearing about his parents and the personal information about his origin, he felt his heart being filled with love he didn't know he had in the first place. The next day Naruto would meet Jiraiya again, but this time they would work together. The Sannin was interested in the Uzumaki's work. He had seen the large flying machines patrolling the fire country and was amazed a 10-year-old kid was able to come up with something like that. The Jinchuriki showed them some of his newer creations and both of them talked about some ideas he had. The Toad Sage was very interesting in his sealing because the blonde was a very adept student of the art. One of Naruto's current projects was a portable shield, something he could control remotely so it could block attacks but don't restrict the movement of his hands. He was using a shield he forged with many barrier seals engraved on it, and while it was something strong, Jiraiya suggested he used some kind of draining seal, so instead of just creating a wall, the seal could suck the energy behind the attack to make it more resistant. All the barrier seals had a maximum resistance that depended on the type of seal and the chakra used to create it. Any attack above that resistance level would break the barrier. If he opted for a seal that absorbed the attack, then it would make any barrier capable of protecting him and even use that energy for something else. Then he showed him the fire containment seal Fuka Hoin he used on some scrolls to protect himself from some nasty fire techniques. Having the seal made allowed him to react quickly in case he received that kind of attack. After learning of the Uchiha clan's intentions, he did dozen of this and shared them with some high-profile people in the village. Kakashi came in the afternoon to check on Naruto and found him working with Jiraiya in the shield he was creating. He was happy the blonde had another person in his life, and especially if it was connected to his roots. Soon he asked how was the progress and joined them, pointing some ideas and flaws he could see for the blonde to improve his creation. Itachi always thought his brother had a lot of talent, but his insecure personality sometimes got the best of him. Now he was frustrated, a boy around the same age as he was so much skilled than him. He was even more proficient with fire-based techniques. Something was outrageous, so the older brother took upon him to have some training with Sasuke to ease his mood. That advice Uzumaki-san gave you is very useful, but you must understand father did not tell you in order for you to discover that on your own, explained Itachi. It's very common among young ninjas to try to learn as many techniques and styles as they can, but learning something is not the same as mastering something. You need to hone your skills on your own. Do the techniques you already know over and over until you use less chakra. Find new ways to use them and make them more powerful, said the Uchiha prodigy in a lecture voice. If Sasuke had to be honest, he should have to say his father said something very similar after he learned the great fireball technique, but he discarded his words for him being too busy to train him, but now he was beginning to see the point in them. Naruto himself had said he trained hard until he got what he needed for his work, so he should probably follow his example. I think I get it now, brother, replied Sasuke with a more peaceful expression. Although it would be useful if you could give me some pointers, added the young Uchiha looking at the ground. He still admired his brother and wanted to spend some time with him, but was too old and prideful to say it loud. Okay Sasuke, let's do that, replied the older Uchiha, flicking his forehead before walking to the lake they used to train their fire techniques. After the success of the last mission involving Naruto, the third Hokage was thinking about sending the blonde as a reinforcement with other rookie teams. This would allow them to take slightly riskier missions and could be a chance for the Uzumaki to interact with other genin. He spoke to his son and he seemed willing to give this idea a chance, so the next time he would assign them a C-rank mission the blonde would travel with them. Jiraiya left the village a week later, but this time would not be the same as always because he had bonded with Naruto, his godson, and he promised to come back in a couple of months to meet him and talk about his work. The blonde was very happy having someone with deep knowledge in seals because it helped him a lot. If somehow he was able to find some expert puppet master and forger, he would be very lucky, but for now he would have to explore those fields on his own, just like he had been doing to this day. The day after the Toad Sage left the village, Naruto was called for another mission. The third Hokage explained to Naruto he wanted for the Uzumaki to have some relationship with his peers, so he would ask him to fulfill some missions with the rookie teams somewhat often. The blonde thanked him for being so forward with that determination and only asked to have some time to work on his creations. The old man had a plan for Naruto, but he needed to acquire more experience in the real world first, not only in combat but meeting other people and exploring the world. He could not solve the world's problems if he only knew the Leaf Village. For this mission, he would assist Team Asuma, composed by Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi and Ino Yamanaka. Shikamaru remembered him from his days on the academy, but neither of his teammates did. Also, despite remembering him, he didn't know anything about it like Hinata did, so that was something. To Naruto, Shikamaru was a smart but lazy guy. Choji was an insecure person with a weak will, and Ino was a little girl who lived in a world of princesses and unicorns. Obviously he didn't say that to them, but he was surprised the Hokage's son allowed such behavior on his students. They had to travel to the border of the Earth and Wind countries to act as the guards of a famous local auction. The town, mostly filled with people from both countries, would likely have some ninjas from the Sand and Rock villages respectively. But the organizers hired them as a third and neutral party. It was a journey of 4 days, so the ninjas had to pack accordingly before leaving their home. There was high risk of confrontation, but Asuma's name and fame should dissuade most ninjas from trying anything funny. During the first part of the travel, Naruto realized how hard it was for most people going from one place to another. He had a good stamina but wasn't used to jump through the trees for so long and got mildly winded after the first hours. He could keep the pace but wasn't satisfied with his performance. Looking around, he could see the 3 genin doing just like him. The only difference was Naruto and Choji weren't complaining because Ino talked about all the things that weren't up to her standards while Shikamaru ranted about things he considered unnecessary. How could Asuma-san withstand this all the time? Wondered the Uzumaki, sick of their bickering after only 6 hours. They did some shifts to keep watch and rest a little around the borders of the fire country. They needed to be in good shape before going into foreign lands, away from the protection the Leaf Village and the flying ships provided to its people. They avoided Wind Country, taking a slightly longer route because Asuma wanted a place too hot. Traveling through that country, or worse the desert, was a harsh task to do with a team of rookie genin, so they went through the grass, mud and earth countries to arrive at their destiny. The journey there was uneventful. Usually bandits and common people stayed out of a ninja team's way because being affiliate to a village and official business meant they had access to backup in case someone got funny with them. Only people very confident tried their luck with a team from one of the large villages or a team from another village that also had the required support in case of need. Team Asuma plus Naruto arrived to the Katamo town at the expected date. The Major was happy to see them because their presence was very important to the auctions, and that event was one that provided a large source of income to the village every year. They invited only the most influential people in close countries, so the exact location was an information known by few. Not all of the leaders and important people came, but most of them sent some emissaries in case there was something their masters wanted. When Asuma saw the amount of people with ninja bodyguards, he began thinking this might be too much for his team. Any person could come in person or send a representative, and any participant of the auction could have 2 bodyguards. The people needed to have their face uncovered, and they were not obligated to wear their respective headbands. Actually, they asked the Konoha ninjas to take them away the moment they entered the village to avoid suspicions of favoritism. The Sarutobi could see this moved a lot of money, mostly illegal money, and people very powerful came here. The Junin leader was asked to check the installations for any kind of hidden trap or device while his genin team was staying at their hotel. It was information too sensitive to share it with them so early. Their job was to guard the 2 doors that allowed the access to the venue and to report anyone suspicious to their team leader or the security managers who were missing ninjas the Major trusted after working for him during many years. Due to the large amount of foreign people gathering in town, they had a lot of stores, attractions and food stands prepared. The whole city thrived thanks to the money the auctions provided, so all of them worked towards the same goal. This captivated Choji's stomach and Ino's desire for nice clothes, so both of them checked on the market as often as they could. Naruto and Shikamaru on the other hand did some surveillance. Both of them realized with all the money and wanted objects around, problems were just around the corner, and they preferred to be prepared when the things went south. At the day of the event, the genin were at the doors, receiving and checking the invitations that allowed the people to enter at the place where the auction would be held. Most people were wearing formal clothes, some with robes, others with suits, but in the end, it seemed money was abundant in this place. Shikamaru had a bad feeling about this. It was a very secretive event based solely on the fact the Hokage wasn't aware of a gathering as large as this where at least 400 of the richest people in the world met. They were banned from bringing visible weapons, but they weren't checking with other methods. The Nara was practically waiting for something to happen, but so far everything seemed to be in order. He was guarding a door with Ino, hoping to protect her if necessary, while Naruto was with Choji on the other gate. The Nara genius didn't know much about Naruto, but he was able to tell the blonde was a serious ninja. Had more power than them and also had a good head on his shoulders, so he trusted the blonde to protect his best friend if necessary. Asuma on the other hand was in the presence of the event organizer watching the safety vault. All the items were kept in a hidden vault underground whose access was hidden from simple view. The place where the auction was held changed every year, but they prepared the place accordingly a couple of months before. The organizer's employees would actually take the objects from there to the auction room. The Junin would be the person in charge of receiving the payment and delivering the product to its final buyer. After checking for the 10th time everything was alright, the auction organizer walked with Asuma to the main hall. There he greeted all of the assistants and thanked them for being there. Also, he said he expected everyone to get what they truly desired from his event so they could go home happy with their new possessions. Just after Asuma and the rich merchant left the place, a man cursed behind a wall. He was sick of waiting for them to leave. He hated waiting and losing his time with every fiber of his body, but this time he had a mission to fulfill and his feelings could be put aside for the sake of the mission. Some minutes passed and the merchants and bodyguards were called to the auction room. They took their respective seats and waited for the event to start. The leader of the event introduced Asuma as his own personal bodyguard and the person in charge of getting the money and delivering the goods, making sure everything was in order. In past versions some people tried funny things, but after very cruel paybacks they stopped trying that to avoid retaliations from the other people who didn't get the chance to acquire what they desired. The first item was a rare belt supposed to be made by the first feudal lord of the Earth country. It had a large black jewel on its center and passed through many generations in that dynasty. Quickly some people raised their hands manifesting their interest of the object. Two men competed to get it until one of them gave up and allowed the other to get the belt. The other people in the room applauded the first victorious man of the night, and one of his bodyguards walked along him carrying a large briefcase with the money. They got to Asuma's position and the Leaf Ninja checked the money to be sure the amount was the same he offered. Then they called one of the workers to get the belt, but after 2 minutes nobody came with the item. The organizer got a little nervous and ordered more of his people to get the item and check what was happening in the first place until a blonde man appeared. He wore a black robe with red clouds and had a mechanical device on his left eye. "Who are you? What is the meaning of this?" asked the organizer using a very loud voice. There was a lot of money involved in this event and he would use all his influences against anyone who dared to cross him. The blonde man walked towards the organizer and Asuma got between them quickly. "My esteemed people from all around the world, I've been asked to thank you in the name of Akatsuki for your selfless contributions to our goals. And art is a bang," said this blonde guy, popping a white figure out of nowhere and throwing it to the center of the room. Sarutobi among other ninjas were able to pick the amount of chakra it emitted and realized it was bad news. He searched with his eyes and saw his genin team gathered at the main door. The 4 of them were together, but the distance between them was too large because this would be released in less than a second. Akatsuki's agent Didera did a single hand seal before shouting, "Katsu!" and the white object he threw exploded in the middle of the room, generating different reactions among the people there. Sealing. Release. Shikamaru heard Naruto say before everything went black around them. A strong tremor was felt at their feet and both Ino and Choji began feeling insecure in the darkness. "Naruto, what is this?" asked Shikamaru, trying to get a hold of the situation. "It's a portable bunker I've created and sealed in my scrolls. It has many barrier seals so it's highly unlikely it gets damaged by the explosion," explained Naruto. "We need to meet Asuma and get the hell out of here," stated Shikamaru, trying to rally his other 2 teammates who were affected by the darkness and all the cries of pain and despair around them. For the first time in his short life, Naruto had no idea what to do. If he dropped the bunker he risked being exposed to the man who produced the powerful explosion, but if he didn't release the barrier they would not be able of finding Asuma. God, what should they do? "Naruto!" shouted Shikamaru, trying to assess the situation. "Shikamaru, do we drop the shield?" asked the blonde, making Shikamaru doubt. The Nara kind of believed Asuma as a Junin was able of anything, but deep down he realized he was only a skilled and experienced ninja just like many others out there. It was possible they faced a problem he wasn't able to overcome. "We need to get Asuma-sensei," said Choji, regaining his composure. Ino was also getting there, and with his whole team there he felt a little more confident. "Naruto, the man that attacked the auction was alone. He could be working with more people, but we just need to stop him for a moment until we meet with Asuma," stated the Nara, getting a nod from the blonde Uzumaki. "Okay, I'll get Asuma while the 3 of you make some time," replied Naruto, who didn't know about them but he knew some general information about the Nara, Akamichi and Yamanaka clans' techniques. Also using his chains he would be able to extract the Junin from a medium distance. He dropped the bunker scroll to the ground and shouted, "Fuin," before resealing the protective dome in the paper. They weren't ready for what they saw. Around them it was all destruction and death. People lying around heavily wounded, some of them missing some body parts. Other ninjas were in better shape trying to help someone, and a couple seemed to be fighting the blonde guy who set the explosion, but he used even more exploding techniques to take them down. He looked around for Asuma and found him with some burns on his face. He seemed to be covering the merchant in charge of the auction with his body, but whatever he did to protect himself left half of his body exposed. The blonde moved a couple meters from his teammates in order to divide the bomber's attention. In case he went for the Leaf's ninjas he would have to pick one of the 2 sides. Using his chains he dragged both their captain and the client to his position while Shikamaru and Ino had their hands ready to perform their clan techniques. At this moment the blonde guy was fighting one of the bodyguards, but from time to time he sent some explosives around the room at some survivors. Shikamaru saw a blur behind him that triggered his next movement. Kage no Jutsu, said the Nara as a reflex before his attention was on the enemy. Shikamaru, don't. That is a puppet, shouted Naruto, who knew a little more than the basics of puppetry. The Nara air-trapped the newcomer with his shadow, and while his movement were indeed restricted, it was just one of many puppets. A moment later a new one came from his opposing side, but fortunately for him, Asuma was able to destroy it, throwing one of his special knives at it. Naruto looked around to see the puppeteer controlling the dolls, but he wasn't in sight. Cursing on the inside for how wrong things went in this mission, he created 5 doppelgangers. The original used his chains to gather his teammates, first Ino and Shikamaru, then Choji, who was heavier and required more focus. Meanwhile one of the copies went towards the bomber to throw some fire techniques and draw his attention. The second clone used the same fire techniques against any puppet on sight, but more than destroying them, he wanted to be the focus of their attacks, while the other 3 bunchins stood around the original, guarding them from attacks. When the real Naruto was bringing Choji closer, one of the copies saw 2 people raising their hands at his direction. They probably were asking for help, so he used his own chains to drag them at their position. He knew what the real was going to do, and that would not be a problem. At the moment all the Leaf Ninjas plus the client and the 2 people one of the clones gathered, Naruto released a new artifact. The 8th version of his chariot, but it was more like a tank than a chariot. It was heavily covered in metal, had the capacity to hold up to 10 people, and while the first versions had pedal systems, this used a chakra-based engine much similar to the one his flying machines did. The blonde placed his 2 hands on the switches and the wheels on both sides started to move. The blonde bomber was going to give chase, but his partner called him. "Let them leave. We have more important things to do," said the puppeteer, pointing at the people lying around. This operation main goal was to gather resources for their organization, and the people they attacked had lots of money with them, so with some luck most of the briefcases endured the explosions Deidara set in that place. The Konoha's group moved forward without doubts. They just wanted to put as much distance as possible between them and the auction place. After 30 minutes of travel, Asuma stated he wasn't able to feel any kind of chakra signature from the 2 people attacking the auction, so Naruto stopped and opened the vehicle. He sent 2 clones to the outside, and after they confirmed the coast was clear, the rest of the ninjas came to the outside. No city or town was visible, and that meant they had to talk among each other to take a decision. In these talks the Leaf Ninjas found the people rescued by Naruto's doppelganger were a niece of the Earth Country's feudal lord and one of the Tsuchikage's bodyguards called Akatsuchi. The merchant was also grateful for their help despite not being able to fulfill the original mission. They saved his life in a very chaotic situation where they could have left him to die there. Akatsuchi said he remembered some things about the place they were in and informed everyone there were 2 close cities, one towards Wind Country and the other closer to Earth Country. Shikamaru looked at Asuma, and the Junin seemed to be in pain but without serious injuries that could risk his life. "I think we should part ways. My team and me should go to the Wind Country as it's Konoha's ally after all, and the lot of you can travel towards Earth Country to avoid any kind of international misunderstanding. It would be highly unfortunate to be saved from dying in the middle of an enemy attack, to be captured by people blinded by hatred," said the son of the 3rd Hokage, who was aware of the bad blood between Leaf and Rock ninjas since the last war. "It's sad to hear that, but I believe you're totally right. I think I'll be able to escort these 2 gentlemen to my country, but I'll forever in your debt, Asuma Sarutobi, Uzumaki-san," replied Akatsuchi with a formal bow. The merchant thanked Asuma while the feudal lord representative also thanked Naruto. Both men coming from Earth Country promised Naruto their respective leader would know about this, and maybe it could be a first step to a better relationship between both nations. The blonde smiled and bowed in return, thanking them for their kind words, but the truth is he didn't know why he did that. A part of him believed technology and power were only to help people, while another part didn't, thought just acted when he saw 2 people asking for help. Whatever reason it was, he was happy with the result. What started as a very traumatic experience ended as a warm goodbye between the Leaf Ninjas and the rest of the people who survived that attack. All the genin could say they returned from that place as different people. Some got a sudden wake up to reality of the ninja life, while others saw how they fared against the dangers of the world out there. After arriving to the closest city, the genin insisted Asuma got some medical treatment. The place didn't have a full-equipped hospital, but a small clinic would be able to provide some care and much-needed rest for the bearded Junin. The Uzumaki used one of his canine summons to notify the Hokage about the delay in their return and some key events to help him understand and obviously assure him his son was out of danger. At this point it was inevitable to relieve the events of the last mission. For Ino and Choji, it was very hard to forget the sight they faced when Naruto released the bunker. They had never seen so many corpses and wounded people in the same place. It didn't help they were physically close to them and that same people were the ones they checked some minutes ago. None of them had been able to get any sleep because every time they closed their eyes that image was there haunting their rest. Shikamaru could see his two best friends in the world acting different. Ino was very silent, which was wrong on many levels because she usually spoke about everything, and Choji on the other side was too stressed to think or talk about food, which told the Nara they needed help, but he wasn't so sure himself about how he felt and he didn't want to impose on his friends. Naruto on the other hand was frustrated and a little overwhelmed. He never wanted to be a ninja in the first place, but this time he had seen some weirdos hurt even one of the Junin sensei, and he kind of woke up from the genin-like bubble. He saw their teachers weren't invincible paladins of justice that slayed the bad in the world. No, they were just more experienced and skilled ninjas who guided them with those skills and experiences to allow them growing as persons and ninjas. He didn't want to think how he would be freaked out at this moment if Kakashi was the wounded instead of Asuma, but the point was the same. If he wanted to be a worldwide known inventor, he needed to be able to deal with these kind of thugs. People who had no contempt for the human life or even fear from the great ninja villages to reach their goals. Akatsuki is what that blonde man said, remembered Naruto, who for some reason believed he would know about them again in the future. Despite Asuma's protests, the genin led by Shikamaru and Naruto insisted on waiting there to allow the Junin to recover from his wounds. The doctor explained he didn't have any serious injury, but his organs suffered from the shockwave caused from the explosion and he had medium-degree burns on half of his face and one of his forearms, including his hand. They could only give him painkillers and lots of water for that, hoping the medic ninjas in the Leaf Village could help him to prevent the tissue from scarring. The doctor also recommended him to wait at least a week before traveling again, and the genin took that to the letter. Shikamaru was starting to see Naruto in a different light. The blonde genin was constantly creating shadow clones and using them to patrol the town and its borders. He knew about all the people that entered and left the place, and he could swear some of those copies discussed about some seals placed in their surroundings. The Nara saw the Uzumaki as someone he could count on. The blonde was very formal and detached with his teammates, but it wasn't something against them in particular. He believed the blonde to be a lonely person who didn't have much experience with peers. His other two friends were opening a little by this point. Fortunately, after 3 days the tiredness was too much for them and the 3 genin members of Team Asuma were able to sleep. From that day forward they were returning to their normal selves little by little. They were still shocked by all that ordeal, but now they were dealing with it on their own ways. After the week of rest and rebuilding, the 5 Leaf Ninjas left the town, thanking to the people who helped them, and started their journey back to their home. It wasn't as relaxed as their previous travel, but wasn't as silent as the first days neither. Asuma was feeling better and hoped he could get some help for his burns. Naruto considered suggesting the use of some vehicle but decided all of them needed some time to reflect, so unless they were in trouble a normal travel back to the village would be more appropriate. 3 days later Team Asuma plus Naruto arrived to the village. The Junin suggested going immediately to report the situation at the Hokage office. He was able to see his father relax when he saw him cross his office's door. Despite Naruto's words, he was worried by his son's safety, and seeing him alive put his old soul to ease. Each of them gave him a verbal report of the mission. The Hokage asked some questions to investigate the men responsible for the attack and put some resources on his auctions, but those were tasks for later. Now he congratulated all the ninjas involved, declared the mission a failure, but still assured them they would get the C-rank payment for protecting the client's life, and after that he allowed them to leave, stating they would have some free time before their next mission. At the moment Naruto got his house on site, he saw Kakashi standing there. The copy ninja was worried when one of his dogs appeared on the village, so he asked the others and they told him as much as they knew, but he still wondered about the Uzumaki's safety. Naruto told him everything and expressed how insignificant he felt in front of the bomber who leveled an entire place full of ninjas and the puppeteer who attacked with multiple weapons without even being visible. How am I supposed to defend from those kind of ninjas? Asked a concerned Jinchuriki who had seen some of the most dangerous criminals out there and was a little overwhelmed. You're not supposed to face them. Not at least in the next 2 to 5 years, and you should be a lot stronger by then, replied Kakashi, trying to calm Naruto but knowing the blonde was too smart to fall for that. But what if they just decide to screw some other random mission? I realized being a Junin doesn't guarantees anything. Some powerful guy can appear anywhere and kill you guys. I don't know what to believe. I preferred the dreamland where the Junin teachers were invincible, admitted Naruto, holding his head between his hands and lowering it. He was in a somber mood and the copy ninja wasn't sure how to help him out of it. I don't know if I should feel sad for you to get that lesson so early on your life or glad nobody had to actually die for you to pick that up, was Kakashi's answer while placing a hand in Naruto's back. He remembered his fist mission as a Junin. He was so young and talented. Everyone called him a genius and for a while he believed it, but your enemies out there didn't care if you were a genius or not. They just killed you, and if somehow you got away they killed your friends, or worse, they tricked you to kill your friends by yourself. After spending some minutes in that position, Kakashi helped Naruto inside his house and shared a light meal with him before leaving. He reminded himself to talk with the Hokage later because the blonde needed help and he didn't have that many relationships with other people to be there for him. Hiruzen could see with his own eyes Naruto wasn't in his best shape at the moment he opened the door. The Hokage made sure his best doctors assessed his son and reassured him there would be no lasting damage to him other than some minor traces of the burns. He also talked with the bearded Junin and the copy ninja who came to his office 2 nights ago worried about the genin he saw as his younger brother. Naruto allowed him to enter and led him to his workshop. The village's leader was able to see lots of paper sheets tossed everywhere. It was obvious the blonde had been working, which was a good sign. He was shaken but his spirit was not broken. In Sarutobi's mind, an artificer like Naruto was doing the only natural thing he could do when reality overwhelming him. He was working on a machine. I wanted to talk about a couple of things with you, so I would appreciate if you sit down, asked the Hokage, taking an empty seat and motioning the Jinchuriki to do the same. The Hokage looked around and saw so much potential. He knew the decision he had taken was right. Naruto, Asuma will probably talk to you in the near future, but he's very grateful because it thanks to you that his team is alive, began saying the old man, trying to make emphasis on the positive lessons from the last mission. I just did the same any other person could have done in the same situation, replied the Uzumaki, trying to point it was no big deal. Yes, Naruto, young Shikamaru could have forced other people to cover them. Ino-san could have controlled someone to act as a shield, sacrificing herself in the process. Choji-kun could also use his family jutsu to protect all of you, risking himself. You see, in the ninja world there are people capable of great things, but just a few of them actually do them, tried to explain the Hokage about the importance of the people that performed the actions, because it was actions, not intentions, that changed the world. When I was much younger, our teacher Tobarama Senju was leading a 6-man squad under enemy territory until he detected we were ambushed. At that moment it was obvious one of us would have to stay as a decoy holding the enemy forces for the rest to escape. I volunteered for the position without thinking much about it. Any of my teammates could have done the same. We were all around the same level in terms of combat capabilities, but I was the only who offered to stay. A few seconds later Tobarama-sensei smiled and named me the 3rd Hokage, saying he would be the one to stay behind because it was the duty of the old generations to protect and foster the new ones. That was the will of fire, and he saw that trait in me. Think about it. Any of us could have volunteered and named Hokage. Even Shimura Danzo, but the one who took a step and did something was me. So don't sell yourself short. Asuma described how you summoned a black dome that protected you and his team, then dispelled it and rescued him, the client, and even 2 random people you didn't even knew. All those qualities would make you Hokage material if you wished to pursue the position, told the old monkey to Naruto, who was listening with his complete focus on the Hokage. It was my duty, old man. I know I don't have many friends, but what is power for if not to help other people? Was Naruto's reply. I never wanted to be a ninja and fight other people. I understand it's important to have the power to protect your work and the people you love, but I don't like having to fight and killing other people. I only want to create awesome things that make life better, admitted Naruto, frustrated and resigned. The world was a violent place where the strong imposed his beliefs on the rest, and it was the only system known for everyone. Hashirama-sensei always hoped people would see past their differences and work with each other. He even believed sharing something as powerful as the tailed beast would create a sense of balance and justice, but unfortunately some people's greed is more powerful. Jiraiya has always dreamed about people understanding each other through words and ideas instead of fighting. When he was younger he believed his books could be a way to share his views with the world. That's where your name was born, but we all know how that ended for his literary goals. Minato, your father died too young. He regretted killing those Iwa ninjas, but he was forced to protect what he loved. He had so many plans to establish better relationships with the other villages. He understood power like his, got respect from other people, and he endured the pain of taking all those lives to create a figure whose words could be really heard by other people, important people, but the events related to the Kyuubi crushed all those efforts, said the old man with a melancholic face. All of those were good people with dreams of peace. Naruto was still a kid who grew up in the middle of an unfair reality, but he felt his heart was the same as those people he mentioned. Sometimes I believe you put too much hopes in a kid that doesn't even want to be a ninja, replied Naruto, who felt those incredible, famous and amazing people were something he could never hope to reach. Have you ever stopped to think if I wanted to be Hokage again? Asked Hiruzen, surprising Naruto very much. I had not said this to anyone, but once Minato took the mantle I hoped to rebuild my relationship with Asuma, spoil my grandsons and have another role in the village, like an advisor, but instead he left us and there was no other person with the proper skills and mindset for the job, so while anyone could have taken it, I did it, not for my sake but for the village and the people I love. Sometimes it's very difficult to send people in dangerous missions where you know they could easily die. Sometimes I've been forced to take incredible hard decisions, but that is the life we have to live and we can only do our best effort hoping it's enough, added the wise Sarutobi, letting Naruto to think for a couple of minutes. I need some time off, old man, to train, to build new things. I can't keep doing this if every second I have to wonder what will I do if some powerful man decided to attack us, stated Naruto, who had many things in mind but needed time to develop them. Could you explain to me what are you building this time? Asked the old man, curious about what new invention the blonde would do. I'm reverse engineering the chakra armors some people used in the now called Spring Country. It greatly enhanced its users' power, so I believe it could be a good asset in combat, but it had many vulnerabilities, so I need to understand how it works and then how I can improve it, explained the Uzumaki, showing the Hokage the damages pieces he had brought from that mission and some of the blueprints he had done the last days. Naruto, I have a new proposition for you, commented the Hokage, getting the blonde's attention because he remembered their first deal. At first I feared if you dropped from the academy and got isolated from human contact you could fall like my old student Orochimaru did, but clearly your heart is much stronger than his, so I have no doubts now. During the last 2 missions you have shown a good head and a natural talent for leadership along with more combat skills than any genin in the village, so you clearly deserve a promotion to Chunin, but I was thinking about delaying it a couple of months to let you rebuild yourself and your self-confidence. And speaking of rebuilding, I want to reinstate the Research and Development Department. For many years it worked under Orochimaru's leadership to work in chemical and biological advances to protect our people from enemies' abilities and toxins, among other things. If you accept, you'll work along with the Torture and Information Department, the Cryptology team, and Jiraiya as the leader of our spy network. You can still work on your own things, but you'll be asked for some things that solve problems for the village. You'll have some staff and a couple of laboratories you can equip as you like within a reasonable budget, and despite your rank you'll only answer to me and the Junin commander. What do you think? Offered the Hokage, taking the blonde by surprise. He was just 12 years old and was getting a position in charge of a whole department in the village's organizational system. It was awesome, but he wasn't ready yet. Is there any time frame for this offer? Asked the blonde, who wanted the job but not right now. I can only wait your answer for a year. Any day beyond that and I'll have to put those resources on something else, but we can always keep the business relationship we have right now where you work at your own pace, and if I see something that could be useful for the village I'll buy the rights to use it, replied the Hokage with a welcoming expression. He didn't want to force Naruto, but he believed it was a very good opportunity for him. Okay, I'll take it. In a year, old man, in a year I'll be ready to lead my own department. That's a promise, reassured Naruto, giving a handshake to the village's leader. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.